The sound of shattering porcelain cut through the quiet cafe like a scream. Aaliyah Thompson froze behind the counter, her hand still gripping the coffee pot. At the corner table by the window, Julian Montgomery sat perfectly still, staring at the broken cup on the floor. But it wasn't the broken cup that made Aaliyah's breath catch in her throat. It was the look on his face. The man was crying. Not the kind of crying that came with sobs or sounds. This was worse. Silent tears streamed down his face as he stared at the untouched second cup of coffee on his table. The cup that was always there. The cup that no one ever drank from. His shoulders shook slightly, and his hands trembled as they gripped the edge of the table, knuckles white with tension. Aaliyah had been working at Riverside Cafe for 2 months, and every single day Julian Montgomery came in at exactly 3 p.m. He ordered 2 cappuccinos with extra foam. He sat at the same table by the window. He drank one coffee slowly while the other grew cold. Then he left at 4:30 p.m., placing a $100 bill on the table regardless of the total. She had never seen him break down like this. The cafe was nearly empty on this Tuesday afternoon. Only Mrs. Patterson, the elderly cafe owner, stood near the kitchen, and old Mr. Henderson dozed in his usual corner booth. Aaliyah set down the coffee pot and grabbed a broom and dustpan. Her red apron, the uniform of Riverside Cafe, swished as she walked carefully toward Julian's table. "Sir," she said softly, keeping her voice gentle. "I'll clean that up for you." Julian didn't respond. He didn't even seem to hear her. His eyes were fixed on that second cup, the one that always sat across from him like a ghost at the table. Aaliyah knelt down and began sweeping up the broken pieces, moving slowly so as not to startle him. Up close she could see more details. Julian Montgomery was maybe in his late 30s, with dark hair that was always neatly combed. He wore expensive suits that probably cost more than Aaliyah made in 6 months. Today's suit was a deep blue, perfectly tailored. His shoes were polished to a shine. Everything about him screamed wealth and success. Everything except his eyes. Those were filled with a pain so deep that Aaliyah felt it in her own chest. "I'm sorry," Julian finally whispered, his voice cracking. I dropped it." "It's okay," Aaliyah said, finishing with the broken pieces. She stood up, still holding the dustpan. "Accidents happen. Would you like me to bring you another?" "No." He shook his head slowly. "One is enough today." Aaliyah nodded, though her heart squeezed at his words. One is enough today. As if the number mattered. As if he was finally admitting something to himself. She returned to the counter and disposed of the broken cup, then watched from a distance as Julian sat there, staring out the window. The afternoon sun cast long shadows across the wooden floor of the cafe. Outside, people walked past on the sidewalk, going about their lives, completely unaware of the man inside who seemed to be drowning in memories. Mrs. Patterson came up beside Aaliyah, wiping her hands on her apron. She was a kind woman in her 70s, with silver hair always pulled back in a neat bun. She had owned Riverside Cafe for 40 years and knew everyone in the neighborhood. "He's been coming here for 3 years, Mrs. Patterson said quietly, following Aaliyah's gaze. "Every day. Same time. Same order. Always 2 coffees. "Why?" Aaliyah asked, though she suspected she knew the answer. "His wife," Mrs. Patterson replied, her voice soft with sympathy. Elena was her name. Beautiful woman, always smiling. They used to come here together every afternoon. It was their special time together, away from his business and her work. They'd sit at that exact table and talk for hours. What happened to her? Mrs. Patterson's expression grew sad. Car accident. 3 years ago this month. She was driving home from visiting her sister when a truck ran a red light. She died instantly. Aaliyah felt her throat tighten. She looked back at Julian, who was now holding something in his hand. She couldn't see what it was from this distance, but the way he held it, so carefully, so tenderly, told her it was precious. "He's never missed a day," Mrs. Patterson continued. "Not one. Rain, snow, holidays, it doesn't matter. He comes in, orders 2 coffees and sits there for an hour and a half. Some days he talks quietly as if she's still there. Other days he just sits in silence. But he always leaves that second cup untouched." "That's so sad," Aaliyah whispered. "That's love," Mrs. Patterson corrected gently. "Real love doesn't just disappear when someone dies. It stays, and sometimes it hurts more than anything in the world. Have you ever loved someone so much that even after they're gone you can't let go? If this story touches your heart, please subscribe and share your thoughts in the comments below. Your support helps us bring more stories of love and hope to the world." Aaliyah couldn't look away from Julian. She thought about her own losses. Her mother had died 2 years ago from cancer, leaving Aaliyah to care for her two younger siblings, Terrence and Nia. Terrence was 16 and trying to finish high school. Nia was only 12, still a child who needed so much guidance and love. Aaliyah worked 3 jobs to keep them fed, clothed, and in school. She understood loss. She understood the weight of it. But this was different. Julian Montgomery wasn't struggling to survive. He was a billionaire, according to the local newspaper articles Mrs. Patterson had shown her. He owned a successful tech company, had more money than most people could imagine, and could do anything he wanted. Yet here he sat, day after day, unable to move forward. At 4:30 p.m. exactly, Julian stood up. He placed a $100 bill on the table, the same as always. The coffee he'd ordered for himself was finished, but the second cup sat there, completely full, the foam now deflated and sad-looking. He walked toward the door with slow, measured steps. As he passed the counter, he paused and looked at Aaliyah. His eyes were red but dry now. "Thank you," he said simply, "for your kindness earlier." "You're welcome, sir," Aaliyah replied, surprised he was speaking to her. In 2 months he'd never said more than his order. He nodded once, then left, the bell above the door chiming softly as he disappeared into the afternoon crowd. Aaliyah immediately went to his table. The $100 bill lay there as always. She picked it up and brought it to the register, ringing up his order for $7. That meant $93 went into the tip jar, which Mrs. Patterson always split evenly among the staff at the end of each week. But Aaliyah wasn't thinking about the money. She was thinking about the second cup of coffee still sitting there on the table. She picked it up carefully and felt the warmth that had long since faded from it. For a moment, she imagined she could see the woman who should have been sitting there, the woman named Elena who had loved this man so much that he couldn't bear to stop ordering her coffee. "Should I throw this out?" she asked Mrs. Patterson. The older woman looked at the cup thoughtfully. "Yes, dear. But do it gently. That cup holds more than coffee. It holds memory." Aaliyah poured the cold cappuccino down the sink and washed the cup with care, as if it were something sacred. In a way it was. That night, as she rode the bus home to the small apartment she shared with Terrence and Nia, Aaliyah couldn't stop thinking about Julian Montgomery. She thought about his tears, his trembling hands, the way he'd stared at that empty chair as if willing someone to appear in it. She thought about love and loss and the way grief could trap a person in time, keeping them from moving forward even when the whole world kept spinning around them. When she got home, Terrence was at the kitchen table doing homework, and Nia was curled up on the couch watching a nature documentary about dolphins. Aaliyah set down her bag and went to the couch, pulling Nia into a hug. "I love you," she told her little sister. "I love you too," Nia replied, confused but happy. "Are you okay?" "Yeah," Aaliyah said, holding her tighter. "I just wanted you to know. Because tomorrow wasn't promised." She'd learned that when their mother died. And Julian Montgomery had learned it when he lost Elena. Love was precious, fragile, and deserving of every moment of appreciation. That night, before bed, Aaliyah made a decision. She didn't know what she could do to help a billionaire who had everything except the one thing he wanted most. But she knew she wanted to try. Maybe, somehow she could help him find his way back to living. Not forgetting Elena. Never that. But learning to carry that love forward instead of letting it hold him frozen in place. Tomorrow she decided she would start paying more attention. She would be ready to listen if he ever wanted to talk. And maybe, just maybe, kindness from a stranger could begin to heal a broken heart. Over the next 3 weeks, Aaliyah watched Julian Montgomery with careful attention. He arrived every day at exactly 3 p.m. Not 2:58 or 3:02, but precisely at the moment the clock tower down the street chimed 3 times. He wore different suits, all expensive and perfectly pressed. Monday was navy blue, Tuesday was charcoal gray, Wednesday was dark green, Thursday was burgundy, and Friday was black. The pattern never changed. He always sat at the same table by the window, the one that caught the afternoon light just right, making the dust motes dance in the air like tiny stars. He always ordered the same thing, 2 cappuccinos with extra foam. He always drank one while the other grew cold. And he always left at 4:30 p.m. exactly, leaving behind a $100 bill. But Aaliyah noticed other things too. Small details that told a bigger story. On Mondays, Julian seemed quieter than usual, as if the weight of starting a new week without Elena pressed down on him extra hard. He would sit with his hands wrapped around his cup, staring out the window without really seeing anything. On Wednesdays he brought fresh flowers. Not for the table but in his car outside. Aaliyah watched through the window as he arrived, always carrying a bouquet of white lilies. He'd set them carefully in the passenger seat before coming into the cafe. When he left he'd take them with him. Mrs. Patterson later told Aaliyah that Wednesday had been Elena's favorite day of the week, and Julian brought flowers to her grave every Wednesday without fail. On Fridays, Julian would sometimes smile. Just a little, just for a moment, as if remembering something happy. Those were the days when Aaliyah felt the most hope for him. She also noticed what he did while he sat there. Some days he'd pull out his phone and scroll through photos. Aaliyah couldn't see them clearly from the counter, but she could see his expression soften, could see his fingers linger on the screen as if touching a memory. Other days he'd simply sit and stare at the empty chair across from him, lost in thoughts that Aaliyah couldn't begin to imagine. One Thursday afternoon during the third week of her observation, something different happened. Julian was in his usual spot, his burgundy suit jacket draped over the back of his chair, his white shirt sleeves rolled up to his elbows. Both coffees sat on the table as always. But this time, as Aaliyah brought over a fresh pot to offer refills to other customers, she heard him speaking. Quietly, so quietly she almost missed it, Julian was talking to the empty chair. "I hired that new team lead you suggested," he was saying, his voice barely above a whisper. "Remember how you said we needed fresh perspective in the design department? You were right. She's brilliant. Came up with 3 new concepts in her first week that the clients loved." Aaliyah's heart squeezed. She quickly moved to another table, not wanting to intrude on this private moment. But she couldn't unhear what she'd heard. Julian Montgomery wasn't just sitting with memories. He was still having conversations with his wife, still seeking her counsel, still including her in his life even though she was gone. "That poor man," whispered Mrs. Garcia, one of the regular customers who came in every afternoon for tea and a scone. She was a kind woman in her 60s who ran the bookstore down the street. 3 years is a long time to carry such grief. "Maybe it's not grief anymore," Aaliyah found herself saying. "Maybe it's just love." Mrs. Garcia looked at her with wise eyes. "Sometimes, dear, they're the same thing." After Julian left that day, Aaliyah cleaned his table as usual. But this time she noticed something she'd missed before. On the windowsill next to where he always sat, someone had carved 2 sets of initials into the wooden frame, JM plus ER. The carving was old, worn smooth by time and touch. Julian's fingers often traced those letters while he sat there, Aaliyah realized. She'd seen the motion but hadn't understood what he was touching until now. Julian Montgomery and Elena Rossi. Their love literally carved into the fabric of this place. That evening, after her shift at the cafe ended, Aaliyah had exactly 30 minutes to get to her second job at the grocery store 3 blocks away. She worked as a cashier there from 6 p.m. to 10 p.m., then had just enough time to get home, check on Terrence and Nia, and grab a few hours of sleep before her early morning shift at the bakery started at 5 a.m. This had been her life for 2 years now, ever since their mother died. Before that, Aaliyah had dreams. She'd wanted to go to culinary school to become a real chef, to maybe even open her own restaurant someday. She was good at cooking. Better than good. Everyone who tasted her food said she had a gift. But gifts didn't pay rent. Gifts didn't put food on the table or keep the lights on or buy school supplies for Terrence and Nia. So Aaliyah had set aside her dreams and picked up extra jobs instead. She didn't regret it. Her siblings were everything to her. Watching Terrence succeed in school, seeing Nia laugh and play with her friends, these things made the exhaustion worthwhile. But sometimes, late at night when both kids were asleep and the apartment was quiet, Aaliyah would let herself think about the life she'd planned. The life she'd given up. Maybe that's why she felt such connection to Julian's story. Both of them were living in the shadow of loss, trying to find meaning in the continuation of daily routines. On Friday of that week, Aaliyah made a decision. When Julian came in at 3 p.m. as always, she prepared his 2 cappuccinos with extra care. She made sure the foam was perfect, creating a small heart design on the top of each one. It was a skill she'd learned years ago when she'd briefly worked at a fancy coffee shop downtown. She brought the coffees to his table herself, rather than having him pick them up at the counter like usual. "Here you are, sir," she said, setting them down carefully. "I hope you enjoy them." Julian looked up at her and for the first time she saw him really see her. Not just as the waitress bringing his order but as a person. His eyes, a deep brown that reminded Aaliyah of rich soil, held hers for a moment. "Thank you," he said. Then, looking at the heart design in the foam, he added, "That's beautiful work. I used to want to be a chef," Aaliyah heard herself say, surprising even herself. "I'm good with food presentation." "Used to?" Julian asked, and there was genuine curiosity in his voice. "Life had other plans," Aaliyah replied with a small smile. She didn't want to burden this grieving man with her own struggles. "But I still love it." Making something beautiful even if it's just coffee foam. There's joy in that. Julian nodded slowly. He looked at the second cup, the one with the heart design that would go undrunk, and something shifted in his expression. She would have loved this, he said quietly. Elena. She always appreciated beauty in small things. A perfect flower, a well-designed building, good coffee art. He smiled just slightly. She would have taken a dozen photos of this before drinking it, just to preserve the moment. It was the first time Aaliyah had heard him say Elena's name out loud. She sounds like she was a wonderful person, Aaliyah said gently. She was the best person I've ever known, Julian replied. His voice was thick with emotion, but he didn't look away. She made everything better just by being in the room. When she laughed, everyone around her felt lighter. When she cared about someone, they knew it because she showed up, every time without fail. You must miss her very much. Every second of every day, Julian admitted. People keep telling me it gets easier. 3 years and I'm still waiting for that to be true. Aaliyah pulled out the chair across from him, the chair that usually held only Elena's ghost, and sat down. She knew she should get back to work, but something told her this moment mattered more. My mom died 2 years ago, she shared. Cancer. I take care of my younger brother and sister now. People told me the same thing, that it would get easier. I don't think it does get easier exactly. I think we just get better at carrying it. Julian's eyes widened slightly. You're raising your siblings? How old are you? 24. Terrence is 16 and Nia is 12. And yeah, it's hard. But they're my family. I wouldn't have it any other way. That's incredibly brave of you, Julian said, and the admiration in his voice was genuine. It's not bravery, Aaliyah said. It's just love. Same reason you come here every day. We do what we do because the people we love matter, whether they're still with us or not. They sat in silence for a moment, two people carrying heavy loads, finding unexpected understanding in a cafe on a Friday afternoon. I'm Julian, by the way, he finally said, even though she already knew his name. Aaliyah, she replied, offering her hand. He shook it, his grip firm but gentle. Thank you, Aaliyah, Julian said. For the coffee art and for sitting with me. And for understanding. Anytime, she said, meaning it. When she stood to return to work, Julian was looking at the second coffee with a different expression. Not quite ready to stop ordering it, but perhaps beginning to think about what that might mean. About what Elena would want for him. About whether loving someone meant staying frozen in the past or finding a way to honor their memory by living fully in the present. From behind the counter, Mrs. Patterson caught Aaliyah's eye and nodded approvingly. Small acts of kindness, her expression seemed to say. That's how healing begins. One conversation at a time. One heart design in coffee foam. One moment of shared understanding. As Aaliyah watched Julian trace the carved initials on the window frame again, she felt something shift. Not a solution to his grief, not a magical healing. But perhaps the tiniest crack in the wall he'd built around his heart. A small space where light might eventually enter. And sometimes that's all it took to begin the journey back to living. The following Monday brought rain, the kind of steady downpour that made the city streets shimmer with reflected lights and sent people hurrying under umbrellas. Aaliyah watched the drops race down the cafe windows, creating temporary rivers that disappeared as quickly as they formed. At exactly 3 p.m. Julian Montgomery walked through the door, completely soaked. His navy suit was drenched, his dark hair plastered to his forehead, and water dripped from his expensive leather shoes onto the cafe floor. But he hadn't brought an umbrella. He never did. Mr. Montgomery, Mrs. Patterson called out, concerned. You're soaking wet. Let me get you some towels. I'm fine, Julian said automatically, then seemed to reconsider. But thank you. That would be kind. Aaliyah was already moving, grabbing several clean towels from the back. She brought them to Julian's usual table, where he'd sat down despite being thoroughly drenched. Here, she said, handing him the towels. You should dry off before you catch cold. Julian took them with a small, grateful smile. Thank you, Aaliyah. I got caught up in a meeting and didn't realize the weather had turned. He began patting his face and hair dry. I should have checked before leaving the office. Would you like your usual order? Aaliyah asked. Please. Though perhaps make them both hot chocolates today instead. The rain makes coffee seem less appealing somehow. Aaliyah's eyebrows rose slightly. It was the first deviation from his routine in all the time she'd been working here. 2 hot chocolates. Coming right up. As she prepared the drinks, adding whipped cream and a sprinkle of cinnamon to each one, she couldn't help but glance at Julian. He was attempting to wring out his suit jacket over one of the towels, looking slightly helpless in the way that very successful people often did when dealing with simple practical matters. Mrs. Patterson sidled up next to Aaliyah at the counter. "First time he's ordered anything different," she whispered. "In 3 years. That's a good sign." "Maybe," Aaliyah replied. "Or maybe he just really doesn't like coffee in the rain." But she hoped it meant more than that. She hoped it meant Julian was beginning to let himself be flexible, to break from the rigid routine that had kept him trapped in his grief. When she brought the hot chocolates to his table, Julian had managed to get most of the water out of his jacket and had draped it over an empty chair to dry. His white dress shirt was still damp, clinging to his shoulders, but he looked more composed. "Here you are," Aaliyah said, setting down both cups. "Extra whipped cream on the house." Julian looked at the drinks and something in his expression softened. Elena loved hot chocolate when it rained. She said it was the most comforting drink in the world. He picked up one of the cups, the one meant for himself, and took a sip. "Perfect. Thank you." Aaliyah noticed he'd picked up his own cup first, not automatically reaching for the one positioned where Elena would have sat. Another small shift. Another tiny movement toward healing. "Do you want me to bring you anything else?" she asked. "Some soup maybe? You look chilled." "I don't want to be any trouble." "It's no trouble at all. We have tomato basil today. Mrs. Patterson makes it fresh every morning." Julian considered this, then nodded. "That sounds wonderful actually. Thank you." As Aaliyah walked back to get the soup, she felt a small glow of satisfaction. He was talking more. Accepting care. These were good signs. The cafe was quiet today, the rain keeping most customers away. Only a few regulars sat scattered at different tables, reading newspapers or working on laptops. The sound of rain against the windows created a peaceful backdrop, a soft rhythm that made the space feel cozy and safe. Aaliyah brought Julian a generous bowl of soup with some crusty bread on the side. "Here. This should warm you up." "You're very kind," Julian said, accepting the food. "Please sit for a moment if you're not too busy. I feel like I should apologize for always being so withdrawn when I come here." Aaliyah glanced at Mrs. Patterson, who waved her hand in an encouraging gesture. She sat down across from Julian in Elena's chair, feeling a bit strange about it but wanting to offer him company. "You don't need to apologize," Aaliyah said. "Everyone handles grief differently. There's no wrong way to miss someone." Julian took a spoonful of soup, savoring it before responding. "This is delicious. You're right, it's exactly what I needed." He paused. "Can I ask you something?" "Of course." "How do you do it? Raise your siblings, work multiple jobs, and still find the energy to be kind to a stranger who sits in your cafe every day ordering coffee for someone who isn't there?" Aaliyah thought about this carefully. "I think about what my mom would want for us. She wouldn't want me to be bitter or angry about her being gone. She'd want us to keep living, keep finding joy where we can. So I try to do that. Some days are harder than others, but I have Terrence and Nia counting on me. That gives me purpose." "Purpose," Julian repeated thoughtfully. "I used to have such clear purpose. Build the company, make Elena proud, create a life together. Now." He gestured vaguely at the empty chair, at the routine he'd been locked in. "Now I'm not sure what I'm doing anymore. Going through motions maybe. Afraid that if I stop coming here, if I stop ordering her coffee, I'll lose the last piece of her I have." "You won't lose her," Aaliyah said gently. "She's not in the coffee, Mr. Montgomery. She's in your heart, in your memories, in the way you still talk to her. That doesn't go away just because you change your routine." Julian's eyes glistened with unshed tears. "How did you get so wise at 24? "Loss teaches you things," Aaliyah replied. "Whether you want to learn them or not." They sat in comfortable silence for a while, Julian eating his soup while rain continued to drum against the windows. Aaliyah should have returned to work, but somehow this felt more important. This felt like one of those moments that could change the direction of someone's life. "Can I tell you about her?" Julian asked suddenly. "About Elena?" "I'd like that," Aaliyah said honestly. Julian's face lit up in a way Aaliyah hadn't seen before. She was an architect. One of the best in the city. She designed buildings that made people feel things, spaces that brought communities together. She said architecture wasn't just about structures but about creating homes for human experiences. He pulled out his phone and scrolled to a photo, turning it so Aaliyah could see. The woman in the picture had long dark hair, warm brown eyes, and a smile that truly did light up her entire face. She was standing in front of a modern building, pointing up at something with obvious excitement. She wore a bright red coat that stood out against the gray city background. "She's beautiful," Aaliyah said. "Inside and out," Julian agreed. We met right here actually. I came in for coffee on a Tuesday afternoon, and she was sitting at this exact table working on blueprints. She had papers spread everywhere, completely absorbed in her work. I asked if I could share the table since the cafe was crowded. She said yes, but only if I promised not to spill coffee on her designs. He smiled at the memory, the first genuine, unguarded smile Aaliyah had seen from him. Did you spill coffee on her designs? Aaliyah asked. On our third meeting, Julian admitted with a small laugh. Knocked over my entire cup. She was furious at first, but then I offered to pay to have her work professionally restored and cleaned, and she said that was the most ridiculously over-the-top solution to a simple problem she'd ever heard. That's when she figured out I had money. Before that, she thought I was just another guy who worked in the area. How long were you married? 7 years. Not nearly long enough. Julian's expression grew sad again. We were planning to start a family. She wanted 3 kids. I wanted whatever made her happy. We were going to begin trying that summer. He paused. She died in May. I'm so sorry, Aaliyah said, meaning it deeply. The worst part is that she died coming back from her sister's house. She'd gone to help with a family issue. She was always doing things like that, always showing up for the people she loved. If she'd left 10 minutes earlier or later, if she'd taken a different route, if 1,000 small things had been different. He trailed off, the weight of all those what-ifs hanging in the air. You can't think that way, Aaliyah said softly. My mom used to say that we can't live in the land of what if. We can only live in the land of what is. And what is, right now, is that Elena loved you. That's real. That matters. Julian looked at her with something like wonder. That's exactly the kind of thing Elena would have said. They talked for another 20 minutes, with Julian sharing more stories about his wife. How she laughed at terrible puns. How she insisted on dancing in the kitchen while cooking. How she volunteered at a community center teaching design workshops to underprivileged kids. How she'd made Julian promise that if anything ever happened to her, he wouldn't stop living his life. She made me promise, Julian said, his voice barely above a whisper. In the hospital before she died. She held my hand and made me swear I'd keep living, keep building, keep finding joy. She said life was too precious to waste on grief. But you haven't kept that promise, Aaliyah observed gently. No, Julian admitted. I haven't. And sitting here talking to you, I realize how much that would disappoint her. Elena was all about moving forward, about creating and building and growing. She'd hate seeing me stuck like this. So maybe it's time to start, Aaliyah suggested. Not to forget her. Never that. But to honor her by living the way she wanted you to. Julian nodded slowly. He looked at the second hot chocolate, still untouched on the table, steam no longer rising from it. Then he looked at Aaliyah. Would you drink it? He asked. Elena's hot chocolate. It seems wrong to let it go to waste, and I think she'd like knowing someone was here with me. Someone as kind as you. Aaliyah felt tears prick her eyes. She reached across the table and picked up the cup. I'd be honored. As she took a sip of the sweet, rich chocolate, she saw Julian relax slightly, as if some invisible burden had been partially lifted. It wasn't a solution to his grief. It wasn't a magical moment of healing. But it was a step. A small, brave step toward living again. When Julian left that day at 4:30 p.m., he shook Aaliyah's hand again. Thank you, he said. For listening. For understanding. For helping me see that maybe, just maybe, I can start honoring Elena properly. By living, not just existing. You're welcome, Aaliyah replied. And Mr. Montgomery? She'd be proud of you for trying. Julian's eyes filled with tears, but he smiled through them. Julian. Please call me Julian. Julian, Aaliyah repeated, returning his smile. After he left, Mrs. Patterson came over and hugged Aaliyah tightly. That was beautiful, dear. You have a gift for reaching people. I just told him the truth, Aaliyah said. Sometimes that's all anyone needs to hear. That night, on the bus ride home, Aaliyah thought about Elena's promise and Julian's struggle to keep it. She thought about her own mother's death and the ways Aaliyah had tried to honor her memory. She thought about love and loss and the courage it took to keep living when your heart was broken. And she thought about how sometimes, the kindest thing you could do for someone was simply to sit with them in their pain and remind them they weren't alone. That healing was possible. That life, even after devastating loss, could still hold meaning and joy and purpose. When she got home, she hugged Terrence and Nia extra tight, grateful for them, grateful for life, grateful for the chance to make a difference in someone's day. Why are you squeezing me so hard? Nia complained, though she hugged back just as fiercely. Just because I love you, Aaliyah said. And in that moment she understood Julian a little better. Because love didn't end with death. It just changed form, becoming something that shaped how you lived every day after. The question was whether you let it trap you in the past or inspire you to move forward. She hoped Julian was beginning to choose the latter. She believed he could. And she'd be there, in whatever small way she could, to help him along that journey. 2 weeks passed and the cafe settled into a new rhythm. Julian still came every day at 3 p.m., but now he varied his order. Sometimes 2 cappuccinos, sometimes 2 hot chocolates, once even 2 chai lattes. He always ordered 2 drinks, but the second one no longer sat untouched. Instead, he'd invite whoever was working to join him for a few minutes, to share the second cup and conversation. Mrs. Patterson took her turn one Wednesday. Mr. Henderson, the regular customer, joined him on a Thursday. And Aaliyah found herself sitting with him more often than not, their conversations deepening with each passing day. On this particular Tuesday, the cafe was particularly quiet. It was mid-afternoon, that lull between the lunch rush and the evening coffee crowd. Aaliyah had just finished refilling the pastry case when Julian walked in, right on time. "Good afternoon," he greeted, his voice warmer than it had been a month ago. Today he wore a dark green suit that brought out the color of his eyes. He'd gotten a haircut recently, looking more put together than when she'd first noticed him. "Hi Julian," Aaliyah replied with a genuine smile. "What can I get you today?" "2 cappuccinos, please. And do you have time to sit? I'd like to tell you more about Elena, if you're willing to listen." "I'd love that," Aaliyah said, preparing the drinks with care. "Let Mrs. Patterson know." The older woman waved her off with an encouraging smile. "Take your time, dear. I can handle the counter." Aaliyah brought the cappuccinos to Julian's table and sat down in what had become her usual spot. The afternoon sun streamed through the window, making the coffee foam glow golden. "What would you like to know?" Julian asked, wrapping his hands around his cup. "Tell me how you proposed," Aaliyah suggested. "That's always a good story." Julian's face broke into a wide grin, and Aaliyah realized it was the first time she'd seen him look truly happy. "It was completely unplanned, which Elena loved because I'm usually so organized. We'd been dating for 2 years and I'd been carrying the ring around for 3 months, waiting for the perfect moment. The perfect restaurant, the perfect sunset, the perfect speech. But," Aaliyah prompted. "But we were stuck in traffic on a Tuesday evening. Complete standstill, not moving at all. We'd been trying to get to a dinner reservation for an hour. Elena was getting frustrated because she hated being late. She was tapping her fingers on the dashboard, checking her watch, sighing dramatically. Julian's eyes sparkled with the memory. Then she looked at me and said, 'You know what? Forget the fancy restaurant. Let's just order pizza and eat it in the car.' And something about that moment, about her willingness to let go of the plan and just enjoy being together, made me realize I couldn't wait another second." "What did you do?" "I pulled the ring box out of my pocket right there in gridlock traffic, opened it and said, 'Elena Rossi, will you marry me?' She screamed so loud that drivers in the cars around us started honking, thinking something was wrong. Then she said yes and started crying and kissing me, and traffic started moving, and I almost crashed the car because I was trying to drive and put the ring on her finger at the same time." Aaliyah laughed, delighted by the image. "That's perfect." "It was," Julian agreed. "That was Elena. She could turn any moment into something special. She didn't need perfect circumstances or elaborate plans. She just needed love and connection." He took a sip of his coffee, then continued. "We got married 6 months later in a small ceremony at her parents' house. She designed the whole thing, of course. Built this beautiful archway covered in flowers, had the reception in the garden. It rained right in the middle of the vows, and instead of being upset, she just laughed and said the rain was good luck. Everyone danced in the rain afterwards. It was magical." "She sounds incredible," Aaliyah said softly. "She was. But she was also human, you know? She had flaws. She was terrible at returning phone calls. She'd start 1,000 projects and finish half of them. She couldn't cook to save her life, everything came out burned or undercooked. She snored like a freight train." Julian smiled fondly. "But those things made her real, made her Elena. I loved her completely, flaws and all." "Tell me about her work," Aaliyah requested. "You said she was an architect?" Julian's face lit up again. "She was brilliant. Absolutely brilliant. She designed community centers, libraries, schools. Places that brought people together. She believed architecture should serve the people who used the spaces, not just look impressive. She'd spend hours talking to community members, understanding what they needed, what would make their lives better." He pulled up more photos on his phone, showing Aaliyah images of beautiful buildings. A library with floor-to-ceiling windows that filled the space with natural light. A community center with an open courtyard where kids could play safely. A school designed to feel welcoming rather than institutional. This was her last project, Julian said, stopping on a photo of a building that was only half constructed. A youth center in an underserved neighborhood. She'd been working on it for 2 years, had all the plans drawn up, had secured funding. She died 2 months before construction was scheduled to begin. Did they finish it? Aaliyah asked. Julian shook his head, pain flickering across his face. No. The project fell apart after she died. The community tried to keep it going, but without Elena's vision and drive, it just faded. That's one of my biggest regrets. I had the money to fund it myself, to see her dream completed, but I was too lost in grief to think about it. By the time I realized I should do something, the funding deadline had passed, and the land had been sold to a developer who built luxury condos instead. That must be hard to live with, Aaliyah said gently. It is. Elena poured her heart into that project. She wanted to create a safe space where kids could learn and grow and find opportunity. Instead, it became housing that those same kids' families can't afford. Julian looked out the window, his jaw tight with frustration. I failed her in that. When it mattered most, I was too wrapped up in my own pain to honor her work. You can't change the past, Aaliyah reminded him. But maybe you could do something similar in the future? There are always communities that need help. Julian turned back to her, something thoughtful in his expression. You know, Elena would have liked you. She always said the most important thing in life was kindness. Not success or wealth or achievements, just simple human kindness. You have that in spades. Thank you, Aaliyah said, feeling warmth spread through her chest. That means a lot. They sat quietly for a moment, sipping their coffee. Outside the window, people walked past on the sidewalk, busy with their own lives. Inside the cafe, time seemed to move more slowly, creating a bubble where two people could share stories and find connection. Can I ask you something personal? Julian said. Of course. What are your dreams, Aaliyah? Beyond working 3 jobs and taking care of your siblings, what do you want for yourself? Aaliyah hesitated. She didn't usually talk about her dreams. They felt too far away, too impossible given her circumstances. But something about Julian's open, interested expression made her want to share. I want to go to culinary school, she admitted. There's a program at the Riverside Culinary Institute that I've been looking at for years. It's a 2-year program that covers everything from basic techniques to restaurant management. Graduates have a 90% job placement rate, and several have gone on to open their own restaurants. That sounds perfect for you, Julian said. Why haven't you applied? Tuition is $40,000 a year, Aaliyah said simply. I make about $35,000 total from all 3 of my jobs. After rent, food, utilities, and school expenses for Terrence and Nia, I have maybe $50 left at the end of each month. It would take me decades to save that much money, and by then... She shrugged. By then, the dream will have passed me by. What about financial aid? Scholarships. I applied for every scholarship I could find. But I don't qualify for most of them. My grades in high school were good but not exceptional because I was working 2 jobs even then. I'm too old for some youth programs, too young for others. And my family makes just enough money that we don't qualify for need-based aid, but not enough that we can actually afford anything. The frustration in her voice surprised even herself. She usually kept these feelings locked away, but talking with Julian had opened something inside her. That's not fair, Julian said, and the anger in his voice was on her behalf, not directed at her. You're exactly the kind of person who deserves opportunities. You work hard, you care for your family, you have passion and talent. The system should support that, not create barriers. Life isn't always fair, Aaliyah replied with a sad smile. My mom used to say that all the time. Life isn't fair, baby, but we keep going anyway. Your mother sounds like she was a wise woman. She was. She was a nurse, worked double shifts to keep us fed and clothed. She believed in education and working hard and treating people with respect. When she got diagnosed with cancer, she kept working until the very end because she wanted to make sure we'd be okay. Aaliyah's voice cracked slightly. She didn't make it to see Terrence graduate middle school or Nia's first dance recital. But everything I do to make her proud. Julian reached across the table and gently squeezed her hand. She would be incredibly proud of you. Anyone can see that. They sat like that for a moment, connected by shared understanding of loss and the determination to keep living despite it. Elena used to volunteer at a youth center, Julian said thoughtfully, teaching design workshops to kids who couldn't afford formal classes. She believed everyone should have access to opportunities to develop their talents. She'd be angry just like I am, that someone as talented as you is blocked from pursuing your dreams because of money. Well, that's how the world works, Aaliyah said, withdrawing her hand and sitting back. She didn't want pity, even well-meaning pity. I'm grateful for what I have. My siblings are healthy and doing well in school. We have a roof over our heads. That's more than many people have. You're right, Julian acknowledged. But gratitude and ambition aren't mutually exclusive. You can be grateful for what you have while still wanting more for yourself. Before Aaliyah could respond, the bell above the cafe door chimed. A group of teenagers came in, laughing and jostling each other, breaking the intimate bubble that had formed around their conversation. I should get back to work, Aaliyah said, standing up. Of course. Thank you for listening to my stories about Elena. It helps talking about her. Remembering the good times instead of just the ending. Anytime, Aaliyah said sincerely. I like hearing about her. She sounds like she was an amazing person. The best, Julian agreed. He stood as well, preparing to leave even though it wasn't yet 4:30. I have a meeting I need to get to, but I'll see you tomorrow? Same time, same place, Aaliyah confirmed with a smile. As she watched him leave, Aaliyah felt a complex mix of emotions. Gratitude for the friendship developing between them. Sadness for all that Julian had lost. Hope that their conversations were helping him heal. And underneath it all, a bittersweet ache for her own deferred dreams. That evening, after finishing her shift at the grocery store, Aaliyah came home to find Terrence studying at the kitchen table. He looked up when she walked in, concern on his young face. You okay, Leah? He asked, using his childhood nickname for her. You look sad. Just tired, she said, ruffling his hair as she passed. How's homework going? Done. I got an A on my history test today. That's wonderful. Aaliyah felt genuine joy cut through her exhaustion. This was why she did it all. These moments with her siblings, seeing them succeed and grow. I'm so proud of you. Thanks. Hey, Mrs. Chen from next door brought over some leftovers. Said she made too much. It's in the fridge. Aaliyah smiled. Their neighbor was kind, always looking out for them. That's sweet of her. Where's Nia? In her room drawing. She's been at it for hours. I think she's working on something for art class. Aaliyah went to Nia's room and found her sister surrounded by colored pencils and papers, completely absorbed in her work. The drawing showed a beautiful garden filled with flowers and butterflies. That's gorgeous, honey, Aaliyah said. Nia looked up, beaming. You really think so? It's for the art competition at school. First prize is $50 and your work displayed in the library. You're definitely going to win, Aaliyah said confidently. You have real talent. Maybe I could be an artist when I grow up, Nia said dreamily. Or a fashion designer. Or both. You can be anything you want, Aaliyah told her, meaning it. She would make sure of that. Whatever it took, she'd find a way to give Terrence and Nia the opportunities she couldn't have. Their dreams wouldn't die because of circumstances. She'd make sure of it. Later that night, alone in her room, Aaliyah pulled up the website for Riverside Culinary Institute. She'd looked at it hundreds of times, memorizing the course descriptions, the faculty bios, the photos of students working in state-of-the-art kitchens. She let herself imagine for just a moment what it would be like to walk those halls, to learn from master chefs, to create beautiful food that brought joy to people. Then she closed the laptop and went to bed, because dreams didn't pay bills, and tomorrow she had the early shift at the bakery. But as she fell asleep, she thought about Elena Rossi, who believed everyone should have access to opportunities. She thought about Julian Montgomery, who was slowly learning to live again after devastating loss. And she thought about how sometimes, the kindest thing you could do was simply listen to someone's story and remind them they weren't alone in their struggles. Tomorrow she'd wake up and do it all again. Work her 3 jobs, care for her siblings and keep moving forward. Because that's what her mother would have wanted. That's what Elena would have encouraged. That's what love looked like. Not giving up even when the path was hard. The next morning started the way most of Aaliyah's mornings did, before the sun had fully risen. Her alarm went off at 4:30 a.m., pulling her from dreams she could never quite remember. She moved quietly through the small apartment, careful not to wake Terrence and Nia, and dressed in the dark. The bakery where she worked her first job was a 20-minute walk from their apartment. Aaliyah didn't mind the early morning walk. There was something peaceful about the city before it fully woke up, when the streets belonged to the few early risers and the street lights still glowed against the fading darkness. Giuseppe's bakery had been in the same location for 40 years. Old Mr. Giuseppe still came in every morning at 5 a.m. to supervise the bread making, even though his son Michael technically ran the business now. The smell of fresh bread and pastries greeted Aaliyah as she entered through the back door. "Morning, Aaliyah," Michael called out from where he was shaping dough. He was a kind man in his 50s with flour permanently dusted on his apron. "Ready for another day?" "Always," Aaliyah replied, tying on her own apron. Her job was to help prepare the pastries and package the bread for delivery to local restaurants and cafes. It was hard physical work, but she enjoyed it. There was satisfaction in creating something with her hands, in seeing flour and butter transform into golden, flaky croissants. "My father wants to talk to you later," Michael mentioned as she began rolling out dough for cinnamon rolls. "He's been watching your work." "Am I in trouble?" Aaliyah asked, worried. "Opposite, actually. But I'll let him tell you." Aaliyah worked steadily through the morning, her hands moving with practiced efficiency. She'd been working at the bakery for 18 months now and had learned every recipe, every technique. Sometimes, when Michael wasn't looking, she'd experiment with her own variations, adding cardamom to the cinnamon rolls or orange zest to the scones. The customers always requested those batches specifically. At 8 a.m., as she was boxing up the last of the morning delivery, old Mr. Giuseppe shuffled over to her station. He was 90 years old, bent with age but with sharp, intelligent eyes that missed nothing. "Aaliyah," he said in his thick Italian accent, "you make beautiful pastries." "Thank you, sir," she replied respectfully. "My son, he tells me you want to be chef. Go to school for cooking." "Yes, sir. Someday, I hope." Mr. Giuseppe nodded slowly. "I watch you work. You have the hands for it. Natural talent. You feel the dough, understand when it's ready. Can't teach that. You're born with it or you're not." Aaliyah felt her cheeks warm with the praise. "That's very kind of you to say." "Not kind. True. My son, he's good baker. But you could be great chef. You should go to school." "I will," Aaliyah said, though the words felt hollow. "When I can afford it." Mr. Giuseppe studied her with those sharp eyes. "Money is always a problem. When I come to this country, I have nothing. Work 3 jobs, save every penny. Take 15 years before I can open this bakery. But I do it because I have dream." "Your bakery is wonderful," Aaliyah said sincerely. "Everyone in the neighborhood loves it." "Is my legacy," Mr. Giuseppe said proudly. "When I die, my children and grandchildren, they have something I built. That's what matters. Not money. Legacy." He patted her shoulder with a gnarled hand. "You remember that. Your dream, it's not about money. It's about what you give to the world." After her shift ended at 10 a.m., Aaliyah had 2 hours before she needed to be at the cafe. She used this time to check on Terrence and Nia, make sure they'd eaten breakfast and were ready for school. Today she found them both already up and dressed, Terrence making scrambled eggs while Nia set the table. "Look at you two," Aaliyah said, proud and surprised. "Being so responsible." "We figured you needed a break," Terrence said, sliding eggs onto 3 plates. "You work too hard." "I work exactly as hard as I need to," Aaliyah replied, but she was touched by their thoughtfulness. She joined them at the small kitchen table, savoring this rare moment when all 3 of them could sit together. "Leah," Nia said hesitantly, "my art teacher wants to know if you can come to the parent showcase next month. She says I'm one of the best students and she wants you to see my work displayed." "Of course I'll be there," Aaliyah promised, even though she knew she'd have to rearrange her work schedule. "I wouldn't miss it for anything. And I made the varsity basketball team," Terrence added. "First game is in 3 weeks. Think you could come?" Aaliyah looked at her brother, seeing how much he'd grown in the past year. He was taller than her now, his voice deeper, his shoulders broader. He was becoming a man and she was so proud of him. "I'll be at every game I can," she said. "You two are the most important things in my life. Everything else is just details." After seeing them off to school, Aaliyah had 30 minutes to herself. She used it to do something she rarely allowed herself. She sat down with a cup of tea and opened her laptop. She navigated to the Riverside Culinary Institute website and clicked on the application portal. The application itself was free. She could at least do that much, couldn't she? Even if she couldn't afford the tuition, she could fill out the application, write the required essays, submit her references. At least then she'd know if she was good enough to get in. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard. Then, making a decision, she began to type. "Why do you want to attend Riverside Culinary Institute?" Aaliyah wrote from her heart. She wrote about growing up watching her mother cook, how food had been the language of love in their household. She wrote about discovering her passion for creating beautiful dishes that brought people joy. She wrote about her dreams of opening a restaurant someday, a place where people could gather and find comfort in good food and warm hospitality. She wrote about working at Giuseppe's bakery and learning the satisfaction of creating something from scratch. She wrote about her experiments with flavors and techniques, her constant desire to learn and improve. She wrote about how cooking, for her, was about more than just food. It was about nourishing people, body and soul. By the time she finished, she'd written 3 pages. She read through it, made some edits, and then, before she could talk herself out of it, she hit submit. The confirmation page appeared. Thank you for your application. Decisions will be sent out within 8 weeks. Aaliyah stared at the screen, feeling a mix of hope and fear. She'd done it. She'd actually applied. Now she just had to wait and see if it led anywhere. She closed the laptop and headed to the cafe, arriving 15 minutes early for her shift. Mrs. Patterson was behind the counter, as always, humming to herself while she arranged fresh flowers in a vase. You look different today, Mrs. Patterson observed. Something good happen? I applied to culinary school, Aaliyah admitted. I don't know if anything will come of it, but at least I tried. Mrs. Patterson beamed at her. Good for you, dear. You should always try. The only guaranteed failure is not attempting at all. The afternoon shift passed quickly. Aaliyah served customers, made coffee drinks, cleaned tables, and chatted with regulars. At exactly 3 p.m., Julian walked through the door. Today he wore a burgundy suit that made him look particularly distinguished. Good afternoon, he greeted with a warm smile. 2 cappuccinos, please. Aaliyah prepared the drinks, creating careful foam art on both. When she brought them to his table, Julian gestured to the empty chair. Please join me. I have something I want to discuss with you. Aaliyah sat, curious. Julian seemed different today. There was an energy about him, an excitement she hadn't seen before. I've been thinking about our conversation yesterday, Julian began. About your dreams of culinary school. About Elena's belief that everyone should have access to opportunities. And about my failure to complete her youth center project. Okay, Aaliyah said, not sure where this was going. I've decided to start a foundation in Elena's name. The Elena Rossi Foundation for Community Development. It will fund projects like the youth center she wanted to build, and it will also provide educational scholarships to people pursuing careers in fields that serve their communities. Architecture, education, culinary arts, social work, that kind of thing. Julian, that's wonderful, Aaliyah said, genuinely pleased for him. This felt like a major step in his healing process. I want you to be one of the first scholarship recipients, Julian continued. Full tuition to Riverside Culinary Institute, plus a living stipend so you don't have to work 3 jobs while you're in school. I'll also set up educational trusts for Terrence and Nia to ensure they can go to college without financial stress. Aaliyah felt like the air had been knocked out of her lungs. She stared at Julian, unable to process what he'd just said. What? No, I couldn't possibly. Why not? Julian asked calmly. You're exactly the kind of person Elena would have wanted to help. You work hard, you have talent, you care for your family, and you have dreams that would benefit your community. This is what the foundation is for. But that's too much, Aaliyah protested, even as hope flared in her chest. That's tens of thousands of dollars. You can't just give that to me. I can and I am, Julian said firmly. Aaliyah, you've helped me more than you know these past weeks. You've listened to me talk about Elena. You've helped me see that I can honor her memory by living, not just by sitting here in grief. You've shown me what kindness looks like. This is me paying that forward. Aaliyah felt tears welling in her eyes. I don't know what to say. Say yes, Julian urged. Say you'll accept the scholarship. Say you'll let me help you the way you've helped me. Part of Aaliyah wanted to refuse. It felt like too much, like she didn't deserve it. But then she thought about the instructions the user had given, about accepting offers with gratitude rather than refusing them. She thought about what this could mean for her, for Terrence, for Nia. She thought about her mother, who would have wanted her to seize this opportunity. And she thought about Elena Rossi, a woman she'd never met but who she'd come to admire through Julian's stories. A woman who believed in giving people opportunities to develop their talents. Yes, Aaliyah whispered. Then stronger, yes. Thank you, Julian. Thank you so much. I'll work hard, I promise. I'll make the most of this opportunity. I know you will, Julian said, smiling. That's why I'm offering it. Aaliyah wiped her eyes, laughing through her tears. I can't believe this is happening. I just submitted my application this morning. You what? Julian looked surprised. I applied to culinary school today. I figured even if I couldn't afford it, at least I'd know if I was good enough to get in. Julian laughed, a full, genuine laugh that transformed his whole face. Elena would say that's the universe confirming this is the right path. She was big on signs and timing and things working out the way they're meant to. They sat together, both smiling, both feeling like something significant had shifted. For Julian, it was taking concrete action to honor Elena's values. For Aaliyah, it was seeing a path forward that she'd thought was permanently closed. "Can I tell you something?" Julian said after a moment. "Of course. This is the first time in 3 years that I've felt genuinely excited about something. The first time I felt like I have purpose beyond just getting through each day. Creating this foundation, helping people like you, it feels right. It feels like something Elena would be proud of." "She would be," Aaliyah assured him. "This is exactly the kind of thing she would have loved." "There's one condition," Julian added. "Once you graduate and establish yourself, I'd like you to pay it forward. Help other young people who have talent but lack opportunity. Teach classes, mentor students, create opportunities. That's how we build a legacy. Not by hoarding resources, but by sharing them and creating ripples of positive change." "I promise," Aaliyah said solemnly. "I'll spend my whole career doing that." They finished their coffee while discussing the details. Julian would have his lawyers draw up the scholarship paperwork. He'd meet with Terrence and Nia to talk about the educational trusts. He'd work with Aaliyah to figure out her class schedule and adjust the financial support accordingly. "One more thing," Julian said as they stood to leave. "I'd like you to help me plan the foundation. You understand what it's like to need opportunities. You know what barriers people face. I need someone like you to make sure we're actually helping people, not just throwing money at problems." "I'd be honored," Aaliyah said. "Really, truly honored." As Julian left the cafe that day, Aaliyah stood behind the counter, still processing everything that had happened. Mrs. Patterson came over and hugged her tightly. "I told you good things were coming," the older woman said. "You deserve this, Aaliyah. Every bit of it." That evening, Aaliyah gathered Terrence and Nia in the living room and told them everything. About Julian's offer, about the scholarship, about the educational trust that would ensure they could both go to college. Terrence stared at her in disbelief. "Are you serious? Like really serious?" "Completely serious," Aaliyah confirmed, still hardly believing it herself. Nia burst into tears and threw her arms around Aaliyah. "This is the best news ever. Mom would be so happy." "She would," Aaliyah agreed, her own eyes filling with tears. "She'd be so proud of all of us." They spent the rest of the evening talking excitedly about the future. Terrence could focus on his studies without worrying about money. Nia could take the art classes she'd been wanting. And Aaliyah could finally pursue her dreams. Later that night, lying in bed, Aaliyah thought about how quickly life could change. This morning, she'd been resigned to her circumstances, accepting that her dreams would have to wait indefinitely. Tonight, those dreams were suddenly, miraculously within reach. She thought about Julian and his journey from grief-stricken widower to someone beginning to live again. She thought about Elena, whose values and vision were creating positive change even 3 years after her death. She thought about the power of kindness, of listening, of showing up for people even when you were carrying your own burdens. And she thought about how sometimes, the universe really did work in mysterious ways. How a simple act of sitting with someone in their pain could lead to transformation for both people involved. As she drifted off to sleep, Aaliyah felt gratitude wash over her. Gratitude for Julian's generosity, for Mrs. Patterson's steady support, for her siblings who gave her purpose, for customers like Mr. Giuseppe who saw her potential. But most of all, gratitude for her mother, who had taught her that kindness and hard work mattered more than anything else. Who had shown her how to keep going even when life was unfair. Who had given her the foundation to be the kind of person worthy of this incredible opportunity. "I'll make you proud, Mom," she whispered into the darkness. "I promise." And somewhere, somehow, she felt like her mother already knew. The following week moved in a blur of activity. Julian's lawyers contacted Aaliyah to begin the scholarship process. She had meetings at their downtown office, where serious men and women in expensive suits went over paperwork and explained trust structures and financial arrangements. It felt surreal. Aaliyah kept expecting to wake up and find it had all been a dream. But every morning she woke up to find it was real. Her life was genuinely changing. On Thursday afternoon, Julian came into the cafe earlier than usual, at 2 p.m. instead of his customary 3 o'clock. He was accompanied by a woman in her 30s with kind eyes and a bright blue blazer. "Aaliyah," Julian called out. "Do you have a moment? I'd like you to meet someone." Aaliyah came over, wiping her hands on her apron. "Of course. This is Rebecca Chen, she's the director I've hired to run the Elena Rossi Foundation. Rebecca, this is Aaliyah Thompson, the young woman I told you about. Rebecca extended her hand with a warm smile. It's wonderful to meet you. Julian speaks very highly of you. Nice to meet you too, Aaliyah replied, shaking her hand. She liked Rebecca immediately. There was something genuine about her, something that suggested she truly cared about the Foundation's mission rather than just seeing it as a job. Join us. Julian invited, gesturing to his usual table where 3 chairs now waited instead of 2. Once they were seated with coffee all around, Rebecca pulled out a tablet and opened a presentation. Julian told me you'd agreed to help us plan the Foundation's scholarship program. I wanted to get your input on several things. For the next hour, they discussed the Foundation's vision. Rebecca showed Aaliyah draft criteria for scholarship selection, proposed program structures and outreach strategies. She asked Aaliyah detailed questions about the barriers she'd faced in pursuing education, what kind of support would be most helpful, how to reach young people who might not even know such opportunities existed. Aaliyah found herself speaking passionately, drawing on her own experiences and those of her siblings' friends. She talked about how many talented kids gave up on their dreams because they couldn't see a path forward. How the complicated financial aid system intimidated people. How sometimes what people needed wasn't just money, but also mentorship and guidance. This is exactly what we need, Rebecca said, taking rapid notes. The perspective of someone who's lived it. Julian was right to insist you be involved in the planning. I'm happy to help however I can, Aaliyah said. Actually, Julian interjected, I have a proposal about that. Rebecca and I have been discussing the Foundation structure. We need someone on staff who can work directly with scholarship recipients, provide mentorship, handle the day-to-day relationship building. Someone who understands the challenges firsthand and can connect authentically with the people we're trying to help. Aaliyah nodded, wondering where this was going. We'd like to offer you a position, Rebecca said. Part-time while you're in culinary school, then potentially full-time after you graduate if you're interested. You'd work directly with scholarship recipients, help them navigate their educational journeys, and provide the kind of support and guidance that goes beyond just financial aid. Aaliyah's eyes widened. You want to hire me? Yes, Julian confirmed. The position would pay $30,000 a year for 20 hours a week of work. That's in addition to your scholarship, which covers tuition and basic living expenses. This would give you extra financial cushion and work experience that could be valuable in your future career. But I don't have any experience with foundation work, Aaliyah protested. You have the most important experience, Rebecca countered. You know what it's like to struggle while pursuing your dreams. You know what kind of support makes a difference. We can teach you the administrative stuff. We can't teach someone to genuinely care about the people we're serving. You already have that. Aaliyah looked between them, overwhelmed. A few weeks ago, she'd been working 3 minimum wage jobs with no prospects of anything changing. Now she was being offered a meaningful career position at a foundation that would change people's lives. I accept, she heard herself say. Then, remembering to show gratitude as instructed, she added, Thank you both so much. This is more than I ever dreamed possible. I promise I'll work hard and do everything I can to help make the foundation successful. We know you will, Julian said with a satisfied smile. That's why we want you. They spent another hour discussing logistics. Aaliyah would start immediately, working a few hours each week while she continued her cafe job until culinary school began in the fall. Rebecca would train her on foundation operations, grant management, and working with scholarship recipients. There's one more thing, Julian said as their meeting was wrapping up. The foundation will be holding a launch event next month. A gala to introduce our mission to potential donors and community partners. I'd like you to be there and share your story if you're comfortable with that. A gala? Aaliyah felt panic flutter in her chest. Like a fancy party with rich people? Yes, exactly like that, Julian said with amusement. Don't worry, we'll make sure you're prepared. Rebecca is excellent at coaching people through public speaking. I've never been to anything like that, Aaliyah admitted. I don't even own a dress that would be appropriate. We have a budget for that, Rebecca assured her. Part of representing the foundation professionally. We'll take you shopping, get you everything you need. And honestly, your authentic voice is exactly what people need to hear. No preparation can replace genuine passion and lived experience. After they left, Aaliyah stood behind the cafe counter in a daze. Mrs. Patterson came over and gently guided her to a chair. Sit down before you fall down, the older woman said kindly. You look like you've seen a ghost. I think I'm in shock, Aaliyah admitted. Is this really happening? It is, dear. And you deserve every bit of it. Mrs. Patterson sat beside her. I've watched you work yourself to exhaustion for 2 years. I've seen you put everyone else's needs before your own. It's about time life gave you something back. I keep waiting for something to go wrong, Aaliyah confessed. For them to change their minds or realize they made a mistake choosing me. They didn't make a mistake. Julian Montgomery is one of the smartest businessmen in this city. He doesn't make decisions lightly. If he thinks you're the right person for this role, then you are. That evening, Aaliyah told Terrence and Nia about the new job offer. They celebrated with ice cream from the corner store, sitting around their small kitchen table and talking excitedly about the future. Does this mean we can afford a bigger apartment? Nia asked hopefully. Maybe one where I don't have to share a room with you? Aaliyah laughed. Maybe eventually. Let's take things one step at a time. I'm proud of you, Leah, Terrence said seriously. You've worked so hard for us. It's cool that you're finally getting something for yourself. This benefits all of us, Aaliyah reminded him. With the educational trust Julian set up, you two won't have to work multiple jobs like I did. You can focus on school and your activities and just being kids. Over the next few weeks, Aaliyah's life transformed completely. She gave notice at the grocery store, keeping only her shifts at the bakery and the cafe because she genuinely enjoyed those jobs. The extra time allowed her to focus on learning her new role at the foundation. Rebecca proved to be an excellent mentor. She was patient and thorough, teaching Aaliyah about nonprofit operations, fundraising strategies, and donor relations. They developed a detailed plan for the scholarship program, including application processes, selection criteria, and ongoing support structures. The key is holistic support, Rebecca explained one afternoon as they worked in the foundation's new office space. Julian had rented a suite downtown with conference rooms, work areas, and a small gallery space where they could showcase the work of scholarship recipients. Money is important, obviously. But mentorship, guidance, emotional support, these things matter just as much. Many of our recipients will be first-generation college students. They'll need help navigating systems that weren't designed with them in mind. Like me, Aaliyah said. Exactly like you. Which is why you're so valuable to this work. You can spot the struggles that someone who hasn't lived them might miss. Aaliyah also spent time with Julian, who was throwing himself into the foundation work with an energy she hadn't seen from him before. The grief was still there, she could see it sometimes in his eyes when he thought no one was looking. But now it coexisted with purpose and hope. Elena would love this, he told Aaliyah one day as they reviewed applications for the first round of scholarships. They were sitting in the foundation office, surrounded by files and coffee cups. She always said the best way to honor someone's memory was to make the world a little better. That's what we're doing. We're going to change lives, Aaliyah agreed, looking at the applications from talented young people who just needed a chance. All of these people, they could be the next great architect or chef or teacher. We're making that possible. You're making it possible, Julian corrected. You helped design this program. You made sure we're actually meeting people's needs instead of just doing what sounds good to wealthy donors. As the gala date approached, Aaliyah felt increasing nervousness. Rebecca took her shopping at an upscale boutique downtown, where the prices on the dresses made Aaliyah's eyes water. Don't look at the price tags, Rebecca advised. Just focus on finding something that makes you feel confident and beautiful. They eventually settled on a dress in a deep emerald green that brought out the warmth in Aaliyah's skin tone. It was elegant but not too formal, professional but still showed her personality. When Aaliyah looked at herself in the mirror, she barely recognized the confident young woman staring back at her. Perfect, Rebecca declared. You look absolutely perfect. The night of the gala arrived. The event was being held at a historic hotel downtown, in a ballroom that dripped with crystal chandeliers and ornate decorations. Aaliyah arrived early with Julian and Rebecca, her stomach churning with nerves. You're going to be great, Julian assured her as they walked in. He looked distinguished in a dark blue tuxedo, more alive than Aaliyah had ever seen him. Just speak from your heart. Tell your truth. That's all anyone needs to hear. The ballroom filled with guests, successful business people and philanthropists who had come to learn about the Elena Rossi Foundation. Aaliyah recognized several faces from the news and local magazines. These were people who controlled vast amounts of money and influence, and she was supposed to stand in front of them and ask for their support. Halfway through the evening, after dinner had been served and Julian had given a moving speech about Elena's vision and values, it was Aaliyah's turn. She walked to the podium on shaking legs, looking out at the sea of well-dressed people watching her expectantly. Good evening, she began, her voice only trembling slightly. My name is Aaliyah Thompson. 6 weeks ago, I was working 3 jobs and had given up on my dreams of going to culinary school. Today, I'm the recipient of the first scholarship from the Elena Rossi Foundation, and I'm employed as the foundation's scholarship coordinator. She told her story. About losing her mother, about raising her siblings, about working herself to exhaustion while her dreams seemed impossibly far away. She talked about what the scholarship meant to her, how it wasn't just about the money but about being seen and valued and supported. The Elena Rossi Foundation believes that talent and passion shouldn't be wasted because of circumstances beyond someone's control. Aaliyah continued, her voice growing stronger. We believe that investing in people's potential creates ripples of positive change that extend far beyond the individual. When you support this foundation, you're not just helping one person go to school. You're changing families, communities, and futures. She finished to warm applause. As she walked back to her seat, several people stopped her to shake her hand and express their support. By the end of the evening, the foundation had raised over $2 million in commitments. You were magnificent, Julian told her as they were leaving. Elena would have been so proud. I'm proud. Aaliyah felt tears prick her eyes. Thank you, Julian. For everything. For believing in me, for giving me this chance, for creating something so beautiful out of your grief. Thank you, Julian replied. For helping me find my way back to living. For reminding me what matters. For being exactly who Elena would have wanted to benefit from her legacy. As Aaliyah rode the bus home that night, still wearing her emerald green dress, she thought about how drastically her life had changed. She thought about the young people who would benefit from the foundation's work, who would get chances they otherwise wouldn't have had. And she thought about how sometimes, the most unexpected friendships could change everything. How sitting with someone in their grief could lead to transformation for both people. How kindness and genuine care could create miracles. Her phone buzzed with a text from Terrence. How'd it go? She typed back, amazing. I'll tell you all about it when I get home. Another text came in, this one from Julian. Thank you again for tonight. You're going to change the world, Aaliyah. I'm honored to help make that possible. Aaliyah smiled, feeling a warmth spread through her chest that had nothing to do with champagne or fancy parties. It was the warmth of purpose, of belonging, of knowing that her mother would be proud of the woman she was becoming. Tomorrow she'd wake up and continue this new chapter of her life. She'd keep learning, keep growing, keep working to make a difference. But tonight, she let herself simply feel grateful for the journey that had brought her here. For the grief that had led Julian to the cafe. For the conversations that had built understanding between them. For the foundation that would change countless lives. For the proof that even in the darkest times, hope could find a way to break through. She got off the bus at her stop and walked the 2 blocks to her apartment building, her fancy dress swishing around her legs. When she opened the door, Terrence and Nia were waiting up, eager to hear every detail. And Aaliyah told them everything, feeling blessed beyond measure to have people to share her joy with. Because that's what love was. Not just being there during the hard times but celebrating the victories together too. That night marked the true beginning of everything. The foundation was launched. Aaliyah's new career was underway. And Julian Montgomery had taken a major step toward healing by turning his loss into something meaningful. The journey was just beginning. But it was a journey filled with hope, purpose, and the absolute certainty that kindness could change the world. One person, one scholarship, one act of generosity at a time. Spring turned to summer, and with it came changes that Aaliyah could never have imagined just a few months earlier. She started her classes at Riverside Culinary Institute in June, diving into a world of French cooking techniques, knife skills, and the precise science of baking. Every day felt like a gift. But she still kept her part-time job at the cafe. Not because she needed the money anymore, but because the place had become special to her. It was where she'd met Julian, where their friendship had begun, where everything had changed. Julian continued coming to the cafe most afternoons, though his routine had evolved. Some days he came at 2 p.m., other days at 4 o'clock. Sometimes he ordered 2 drinks, sometimes just 1. He no longer came out of obligation or grief but because he wanted to. Because the cafe represented connection and friendship, not just loss. On a warm Tuesday afternoon in late June, Aaliyah finished her morning classes and headed to the cafe for her shift. She arrived to find Julian already there, sitting at his usual table with Mrs. Patterson. They were laughing about something, their heads close together in conversation. What's so funny? Aaliyah asked, joining them. Julian was telling me about his presentation to the city council yesterday, Mrs. Patterson explained, wiping tears of laughter from her eyes. Apparently the mayor fell asleep during the budget portion. Literally snoring, Julian added with amusement. Right in the middle of my explanation of the Foundation's community development initiatives. I had to pause and wait for her aide to nudge her awake. Aaliyah laughed, delighted to see Julian in such good spirits. The man who had sat crying over cold coffee just a few months ago seemed like a different person. Or maybe the same person, but one who was learning to live again. How are classes? Julian asked, shifting his attention to Aaliyah. Incredible, she replied enthusiastically. Today we learned to make perfect hollandaise sauce. Do you know how temperamental that sauce is? The temperature has to be exact or the eggs curdle. It took me 7 tries to get it right. But you got it, Julian noted. But I got it, Aaliyah confirmed with satisfaction. My instructor said I have excellent instincts for when something's about to go wrong. I can feel it in the texture, apparently. That's the gift, Mrs. Patterson said wisely. Some people can follow recipes perfectly and never understand cooking. Others feel it in their bones. You're one of the latter. As they chatted, Aaliyah noticed a photograph on the table that she hadn't seen before. It showed Julian and Elena at the beach, both laughing, their hair wind-blown and faces sunburned. They looked radiantly happy. New picture? She asked gently. Julian picked it up, holding it carefully. Not new. Just one I haven't looked at in a while. This was from our anniversary trip 2 years before she died. We went to the coast, stayed in this terrible little motel that smelled like fish. Elena thought it was hilarious. She said sometimes the worst accommodations make the best memories. She was right about that, Mrs. Patterson said. Some of my favorite memories are from our most imperfect moments. Julian nodded, still looking at the photo. I've been going through old pictures lately. Rebecca suggested it as part of my healing process. She said I needed to remember Elena in joy, not just in loss. That's good advice, Aaliyah said. It is. And it's helping. I spent 3 years avoiding anything that reminded me of Elena because it hurt too much. Now I'm realizing that the pain means the love mattered. And I don't want to run from that anymore. Over the next few weeks, Aaliyah watched Julian continue to open up. He started talking about Elena more freely, sharing stories not just with Aaliyah but with other cafe regulars. He laughed more often. He made plans for the future. He was slowly but surely rejoining the land of the living. The foundation was thriving. They'd awarded 15 scholarships in their first round, supporting students pursuing degrees in architecture, education, culinary arts, social work, and community development. Rebecca had hired 2 additional staff members to handle the growing workload. They were planning to double the number of scholarships in the next round. Aaliyah loved her work with the foundation. She met with scholarship recipients weekly, helping them navigate financial aid forms, connect with resources on their campuses, and work through the inevitable challenges that came with pursuing higher education. Many of them came from backgrounds similar to hers, and she understood their struggles in ways that no handbook could teach. One afternoon in late July, Aaliyah was working at the foundation office when her phone rang. It was Julian. Are you busy? He asked. Just finishing up some scholarship reports. Why? I'm at the cafe and I'd like you to come by if you can. There's something I want to show you. Intrigued, Aaliyah wrapped up her work and headed to the cafe. She found Julian at his usual table, but this time he had a large portfolio case with him. What's this? She asked, sitting down. Elena's designs for the youth center, Julian said, opening the portfolio. I finally went through her files and found all the original plans. I thought you might like to see them. He spread the drawings across the table. They were beautiful, detailed architectural renderings of a modern building with lots of windows and open spaces. Aaliyah could see classrooms, an art studio, a commercial kitchen, a gymnasium, a library, and a large common area designed for community gatherings. Julian, this is amazing, Aaliyah breathed, studying the drawings. She designed a whole kitchen? She knew I wanted to fund cooking classes for kids, Julian explained. She said teaching people to cook was teaching them to nurture themselves and others. That it was an essential life skill everyone should have access to learning. Aaliyah felt her throat tighten. She traced the kitchen design with her finger, seeing the thought and care that had gone into every detail. Professional-grade equipment but arranged in a way that wasn't intimidating. Multiple workstations so classes could accommodate lots of students. Storage designed for accessibility. What are you going to do with these? Aaliyah asked. Julian was quiet for a moment. Then he said, I'm going to build it. The youth center. I should have done it 3 years ago, but I was too lost in grief to think clearly. Now, with the foundation established and my head clearer, I want to make Elena's vision real. That's wonderful, Aaliyah said, feeling tears prick her eyes. I want to hire you to run the kitchen program, Julian continued. Once you graduate from culinary school, you develop the curriculum, teach classes, mentor young people who want to learn cooking. It would be part of your role with the foundation. Aaliyah looked at him, overwhelmed. You've already given me so much. I'm not giving you anything, Julian corrected. I'm offering you an opportunity to use your talents to serve your community. That's what Elena's Center was always meant to be about. Creating opportunities for people to discover and develop their gifts. Then yes, Aaliyah said, accepting with the gratitude she'd been instructed to show. Absolutely yes. I'd be honored to run that program. Thank you for trusting me with something so important to Elena's memory. Julian smiled, genuine warmth in his expression. Thank you for being exactly the kind of person who would make this work meaningful. Elena would have loved you, Aaliyah. You remind me of her in a lot of ways. That same genuine care for others, that same belief that kindness matters. They spent the next hour going through all of Elena's designs, with Julian sharing the vision she'd had for each space. The art studio where kids could explore creativity. The library designed to feel cozy and welcoming rather than institutional. The gymnasium with equipment sized for children. The common area where families could gather for community events. When will construction start? Aaliyah asked. Next spring if everything goes according to plan. I've already secured the land. It's in the Riverside neighborhood about 6 blocks from here. The permit process is underway. I'm hoping we can break ground in March and have the center open by the following fall. That's ambitious. Elena would want it done right, but she'd also want it done without unnecessary delay. There are kids who need this center now, not 10 years from now. As summer progressed, Aaliyah fell into a comfortable rhythm. Morning classes at culinary school, where she learned everything from basic stocks to advanced pastry techniques. Afternoon shifts at the cafe, where she practiced her skills and enjoyed the familiar comfort of the neighborhood space. Evenings working on foundation business, meeting with scholarship recipients and helping plan programs. And through it all, her friendship with Julian deepened. They met regularly, sometimes at the cafe, sometimes at the foundation office, occasionally for walks through the city. They talked about Elena, about Aaliyah's mother, about their dreams for the future, about books and movies and food and life. Julian started dating again, which surprised Aaliyah. He met a woman named Patricia who worked in urban planning. She was kind and understood that Julian's love for Elena didn't diminish his capacity to care for others. I never thought I'd be able to do this, Julian confessed to Aaliyah one day. They were sitting in a park near the cafe eating ice cream cones in the late summer heat. Move forward, meet someone new. It feels both right and wrong at the same time. Elena would want you to be happy, Aaliyah reminded him. From everything you've told me about her, she'd be upset if you spent the rest of your life alone. I know. Patricia actually reminds me of her in some ways. Not in appearance but in spirit. That same enthusiasm for life, that same belief that we should be building things that make the world better. Then enjoy it, Aaliyah urged. Let yourself be happy without guilt. That's the best way to honor Elena's memory. Julian looked at her thoughtfully. When did you get so wise? Around the same time you started ordering variations on your coffee order, Aaliyah replied with a grin. They both laughed, comfortable in their friendship, grateful for the journey that had brought them to this moment. One evening in late August, Aaliyah came home from her classes to find Terrence and Nia in the living room, both wearing expressions of barely contained excitement. What's going on? Aaliyah asked, immediately suspicious. We got our school assignments for the fall, Terrence said, grinning widely. I'm taking all honors classes. And I got into the accelerated science program. That's amazing. Aaliyah hugged him tightly. I'm so proud of you. And I got into the district art magnet program, Nia added, bouncing with excitement. It's the most competitive art program in the city. My teacher nominated me and I got in. Aaliyah hugged Nia too, feeling overwhelming pride. Her siblings were thriving. They were pursuing their interests, excelling academically, becoming the people their mother had hoped they'd be. Mom would be so proud, Aaliyah said, her voice thick with emotion. She'd be proud of you too, Terrence said seriously. You sacrificed so much for us. And now you're doing your dream program and helping other people. That's pretty cool, yeah? That night, as Aaliyah lay in bed, she thought about how far they'd all come. Just 6 months ago, she'd been struggling to keep everything together, working herself to exhaustion with no end in sight. Now, thanks to Julian's generosity and the opportunities that had unfolded from their friendship, all three of them were pursuing paths that would have seemed impossible before. She thought about Julian too and his own journey from grief to healing. He was building Elena's youth center, creating meaningful programs through the foundation, dating again, living again. He was keeping his promise to Elena, the one she'd made him give in the hospital. He was choosing life. And Aaliyah realized that's what healing looked like. Not forgetting the loss or pretending the pain didn't exist, but learning to carry it while still moving forward, still creating, still loving, still living fully. Her phone buzzed with a text from Julian. The city council approved the permits for the youth center. Construction begins in March. Elena's dream is becoming real. Thank you for being part of this journey. Aaliyah smiled and texted back. Thank you for showing me that grief and hope can coexist, and for giving me the chance to be part of something so meaningful. She fell asleep feeling grateful, excited for the future, and deeply aware of how interconnected lives could be. How one person's pain could lead to another person's opportunity. How friendship could emerge from unlikely circumstances. How healing was never a solitary journey but something that happened in relationship with others. Tomorrow would bring new classes, new challenges, new growth. But tonight, she simply rested in the knowledge that she was exactly where she was meant to be. Autumn arrived with crisp air and golden leaves tumbling along the sidewalks. Aaliyah was now several months into her culinary program and loving every minute of it. Her instructors praised her natural talent and creative approach to flavors. She'd even begun developing her own recipes, fusion dishes that combined traditional techniques with unexpected ingredients. The foundation was also flourishing. They just announced their second round of scholarships, this time offering 25 spots to deserving students. Applications poured in from across the region. Aaliyah spent her evenings reading through them, moved by each person's story and dreams. Julian had broken ground on Elena's youth center the previous month. The construction site was active with workers laying foundation and framing the building. Julian visited the site daily, watching his late wife's vision take shape in concrete and steel. Everything seemed to be going wonderfully. Until it wasn't. On a Monday morning in October, Aaliyah arrived at the cafe for her afternoon shift to find Mrs. Patterson sitting at a table, papers spread in front of her, quietly crying. Mrs. Patterson? Aaliyah rushed over, alarmed. She'd never seen the older woman cry before. What's wrong? Are you okay? Mrs. Patterson looked up, her kind face crumpled with worry. Oh, Aaliyah. I'm so sorry, dear. I didn't mean for you to see me like this. What happened? Aaliyah sat down, taking Mrs. Patterson's hand. The landlord is raising the rent, Mrs. Patterson said, gesturing at the papers. Doubling it starting next month. Says the neighborhood is being revitalized and the property values have gone up. If I can't pay the new rate, I have to vacate by the end of December. Aaliyah felt her stomach drop. Can he do that? Just double the rent like that? Technically, yes. The lease is month to month. He's within his legal rights, even if it's morally questionable. Mrs. Patterson wiped her eyes with a handkerchief. I've been running this cafe for 40 years, Aaliyah. 40 years. I've served this community, provided a gathering place for the neighborhood. And now I'm being pushed out because someone wants to turn this into some trendy coffee shop that charges $12 for a latte. How much is the new rent? Aaliyah asked. Mrs. Patterson showed her the letter. The number made Aaliyah's eyes widen. It was astronomical, nearly 3 times what a small cafe could reasonably afford to pay. I don't have that kind of money, Mrs. Patterson continued, her voice breaking. I've put every penny back into this place over the years. My retirement savings are modest. I can't afford to stay, and even if I could, these rates would force me to raise prices so high that my regular customers couldn't afford to come anymore. Aaliyah felt tears well in her own eyes. Riverside Cafe wasn't just a coffee shop. It was where Julian had sat in his grief and begun to heal. It was where they'd formed their friendship. It was where Mrs. Patterson had built a life and served countless customers with kindness and care. It was a cornerstone of the community. There has to be something we can do, Aaliyah said. We can't let this place close. I've been trying to figure that out all morning, Mrs. Patterson admitted. I thought about getting a loan, but at my age no bank will lend to me. I thought about finding investors, but I don't know anyone with that kind of money who'd be interested in a small neighborhood cafe. Over the next few days, word spread through the neighborhood about the cafe's situation. Regular customers expressed their outrage and sadness. Many offered to help, but individual contributions couldn't make up the shortfall. The community organized a fundraiser, but it only raised enough to cover 1 month's rent increase. Julian came into the cafe on Wednesday and immediately knew something was wrong. The usual warm atmosphere felt subdued. Mrs. Patterson moved through her tasks mechanically, without her customary cheerfulness. What's going on? Julian asked Aaliyah. She explained the situation, showing him the landlord's letter. Julian's expression grew dark with anger. "This is criminal," he said. "Not literally but morally. This is how communities get destroyed, how local businesses get replaced by chains and luxury developments that price everyone out." "We're trying to figure out solutions," Aaliyah said. "But honestly, I don't know what we can do. The numbers don't work. Even if we had enough for a few months, we'd just be delaying the inevitable." Julian sat quietly for a moment, thinking. Then he stood abruptly. "I need to make some calls," he said. "Don't give up yet." He left the cafe quickly, his phone already at his ear. Aaliyah watched him go, feeling a flicker of hope but trying not to let it grow too strong. Even Julian's resources had limits. That evening, the neighborhood held a community meeting at the library to discuss the cafe situation. Nearly 100 people showed up, testimony to how much Riverside Cafe meant to people. They sat in folding chairs, talking anxiously about what losing the cafe would mean. "It's not just about coffee," one elderly man said. "It's about having a place where everyone knows your name. Where you can sit for hours without anyone rushing you. Where the owner knows how you take your coffee before you order. My kids did their homework there after school while I finished my shift," a single mother added. "Mrs. Patterson would give them free cookies and help them with their math. Where am I supposed to send them now?" "I met my wife there," another regular shared. "She was sitting at the corner table reading a book. I asked if I could join her. We've been married 35 years now. That cafe is full of memories like that." Aaliyah stood and shared her own story. How Julian had come to the cafe every day in his grief. How their conversations had led to the foundation that was now changing lives. How this place had been the catalyst for so much good. "We can't let it close," she finished. "Riverside Cafe is more than a business. It's the heart of this neighborhood." But despite the passionate speeches and genuine love for the cafe, no one had a solution. The financial reality was too stark. The rent was too high. The timeline too short. Mrs. Patterson stood and thanked everyone for their support. "Whatever happens," she said, tears in her eyes, "I want you to know that these 40 years have been the greatest privilege of my life. You've all become my family. This cafe has been my heart and soul. If this is the end, at least I had the blessing of serving this community for so long." People were openly crying now. The meeting ended with hugs and promises to continue fighting, but everyone felt the weight of likely defeat. Aaliyah walked home slowly that night, her heart heavy. She thought about Julian sitting at his table, about Elena's memory being honored in that space, about the initials carved in the windowsill. She thought about Mrs. Patterson, who'd given her a job when she desperately needed one, who'd been kind and patient and supportive. The thought of the cafe closing felt like losing something sacred. When she got home, she found a text from Julian. "Don't lose hope. I'm working on something." But Aaliyah had learned not to count on miracles. Life had taught her that sometimes, despite everyone's best efforts, things fell apart. Sometimes the good guys didn't win. Sometimes beloved places closed and communities scattered and nothing you could do would change it. She tried to prepare herself for that reality. But it hurt more than she expected. Over the next 2 weeks, the cafe continued operating under a dark cloud. Customers came more frequently, as if trying to store up memories before it was too late. People took photos of the interior, of Mrs. Patterson behind the counter, of their favorite tables. Julian came every day but said little about whatever he was working on. Aaliyah didn't press him. She was grateful for his efforts but didn't want to get her hopes up. The deadline loomed. December 31st. 2 months away. After that, if Mrs. Patterson couldn't meet the new rent, she'd have to close. Aaliyah threw herself into her schoolwork and foundation responsibilities, trying not to think about it. But every time she walked into the cafe, she felt the impending loss like a physical weight on her chest. On a Friday afternoon in mid-November, Aaliyah was working the counter when Julian walked in with an expression she couldn't read. He ordered his coffee, then asked if she and Mrs. Patterson could take a break to talk with him. "Is it bad news?" Mrs. Patterson asked, joining them at Julian's table. "No," Julian said, and there was something in his voice that made Aaliyah sit up straighter. "Actually, it's good news. Very good news." He pulled out a folder and opened it on the table. "I've purchased the building," Julian said simply. "As of this morning, I'm your new landlord." Aaliyah gasped. Mrs. Patterson went completely still, her face pale. "What?" the older woman whispered. "I bought the building from your previous landlord," Julian explained. "I've been negotiating with him for the past 2 weeks. He was difficult, drove the price up significantly because he knew I wanted it. But as of today, the deed is transferred to my name. Julian, you can't. Mrs. Patterson started. I can and I did, Julian interrupted gently. And before you protest, let me explain the full plan. I'm not doing this as charity. I'm doing this as part of the foundation's mission. He pulled out additional papers. I'm converting this building into a foundation property. The cafe will continue operating on the ground floor at your current rent rate, adjusted only for reasonable inflation. But I'm renovating the upper floors which have been sitting empty for years. We'll create affordable workspace for foundation scholarship recipients who are starting their own businesses. A commercial kitchen that Aaliyah can use for teaching classes. Meeting rooms for community organizations. Aaliyah felt tears streaming down her face. Mrs. Patterson was openly sobbing now. You're keeping the cafe? Mrs. Patterson asked through her tears. I'm keeping the cafe, Julian confirmed. You've served this community for 40 years. You gave me a place to grieve and begin healing. This cafe is where I started finding my way back to life. I'm not going to let it disappear because of greed and gentrification. Mrs. Patterson stood on shaky legs and hugged Julian tightly. Thank you, she kept repeating. Thank you, thank you, thank you. Thank you, Julian replied. For creating a space where broken people could begin to mend. For showing me that community matters. For demonstrating every day what kindness looks like in action. As news spread, the cafe filled with people celebrating. Customers who'd heard about the crisis came in to congratulate Mrs. Patterson and thank Julian. There were tears and laughter and a sense of collective relief. We're at a pivotal moment in the story. If you're invested in seeing how Julian's generosity creates ripples of positive change, please subscribe and let us know what you think in the comments below. Your engagement helps us share more stories of hope and community. That evening, after the cafe closed, Aaliyah, Julian, and Mrs. Patterson sat together in the empty space, processing what had happened. I still can't quite believe it, Mrs. Patterson said, shaking her head in wonder. This morning I thought I was losing my life's work. Tonight it's saved. Not just saved, Julian said. Transformed. This building will become a hub for community development. We'll have scholarship recipients working upstairs, running businesses, creating jobs. The cafe will remain the heart of it, the gathering place where people connect. Elena would love this, Aaliyah observed. She would, Julian agreed. She always said buildings should serve communities, not the other way around. This is exactly the kind of project she would have championed. As Aaliyah walked home that night, she felt overwhelmed by gratitude and wonder. She thought about how close they'd come to losing the cafe. How the community had rallied but couldn't solve the problem alone. How Julian had stepped in, using his resources to protect something precious. She thought about how money could be used for good, how wealth could serve community needs rather than just accumulating more wealth. She thought about Elena's vision living on through Julian's actions. And she thought about how sometimes, just when things seemed darkest, hope could break through in unexpected ways. How one person's generosity could save something that mattered to hundreds. How the ripples of kindness kept spreading wider and wider. When she got home, Terrence and Nia were waiting up for her. We heard, Terrence said, grinning. Everyone's talking about it. Mr. Montgomery saved the cafe. He did, Aaliyah confirmed. He really did. That's so cool, Nia said. He's like a real-life superhero. Aaliyah laughed. I guess he kind of is. Though I think he'd say he's just trying to do what Elena would have wanted. That night, lying in bed, Aaliyah thought about the community coming together, about Julian's decisive action, about Mrs. Patterson's tears of relief and joy. She thought about how the cafe would continue serving the neighborhood, how it would expand to offer even more support to the community. And she thought about how love, even love for someone who was gone, could motivate people to do extraordinary things. How Julian's love for Elena had transformed from paralyzing grief into purposeful action. How that transformation was changing lives every single day. Tomorrow the cafe would open as usual. Customers would come for their morning coffee, never knowing how close they'd come to losing this cherished place. Mrs. Patterson would greet them with her warm smile, serving them with the same dedication she'd shown for 40 years. But everything would be different now. Because the cafe was secure. Because the community's heart would keep beating. Because one man had chosen to use his resources to protect something precious rather than pursuing profit. And because sometimes, when people acted from love and kindness rather than greed and selfishness, miracles could happen. Not supernatural miracles, but the very real miracle of human generosity creating positive change. Aaliyah fell asleep with a smile on her face, grateful beyond words for the journey that had brought them all to this moment. Grateful for Julian's friendship, for Mrs. Patterson's kindness, for the community that cared so deeply about a simple cafe. Grateful for proof that in a world that often felt cold and selfish, warmth and generosity could still prevail. The weeks following Julian's purchase of the cafe building moved quickly. Contractors assessed the upper floors, architects drew renovation plans, and the foundation staff coordinated with community organizations about the upcoming shared workspace. Mrs. Patterson walked around with a permanent smile, unable to quite believe that her cafe was saved. Regular customers treated Julian like a local hero, though he brushed off the praise with characteristic modesty. "I just did what anyone with means should do," he'd say. "Use those resources to strengthen community rather than profit from its destruction." December arrived with the first snow, dusting the city in white. Aaliyah finished her fall semester at culinary school with perfect grades and high praise from her instructors. Her knife skills were impeccable, her palate sophisticated, and her creativity in developing recipes was starting to turn heads. The Foundation Scholarship Program had grown beyond anyone's initial expectations. They now had 40 active scholarship recipients, each paired with mentors and receiving comprehensive support. Several of the first-round recipients had already started internships that would likely lead to excellent career opportunities after graduation. Construction on Elena's youth center was ahead of schedule. The building's skeleton was complete, walls were going up, and Julian visited the site almost daily to check progress. He'd hired Elena's former architecture firm to oversee the construction, ensuring every detail matched her original vision. On a snowy Tuesday afternoon, exactly 1 year after Aaliyah had first really noticed Julian's grief-stricken tears over his coffee, Julian came into the cafe with unusual energy. Aaliyah was behind the counter, practicing latte art between customers when he walked in. "I need to talk to you," Julian said, his eyes bright with excitement. "And Mrs. Patterson, is she here?" "In the office," Aaliyah replied. "Should I get her?" "Please." A few minutes later, all three sat at Julian's usual table by the window. Outside, snow fell softly, creating a peaceful winter scene. "The youth center is going to be completed in March," Julian began. 2 months ahead of schedule. "The contractors have been incredible, really understanding how important this project is." "That's wonderful news," Mrs. Patterson said. "It is. And I want to have a grand opening celebration that honors Elena's memory properly. Not just a ribbon-cutting ceremony, but something meaningful that demonstrates what the center will offer the community." "What did you have in mind?" Aaliyah asked. Julian pulled out his tablet and showed them a detailed presentation. A full day of events. Cooking demonstrations in the kitchen for kids and families. Art workshops in the studio. Tours of all the facilities. Performances by local youth groups in the gymnasium. And a community dinner in the evening catered by. He looked at Aaliyah meaningfully. "By our very own scholarship recipient and soon-to-be culinary school graduate." Aaliyah's eyes widened. "Me? You want me to cater the opening? I want you to design and execute a menu that showcases your training and creativity. We'll hire additional help, of course. But this would be your menu, your vision. What better way to demonstrate the kind of talent the foundation supports?" "That's a huge responsibility," Aaliyah said, feeling both excited and terrified. "You're ready for it," Julian said confidently. "Your instructors rave about your skills. You've been developing beautiful recipes. This is your chance to show the community what you can do." Aaliyah looked at Mrs. Patterson, who nodded encouragingly. "You should do it, dear. It's a wonderful opportunity." "Okay," Aaliyah agreed, her heart racing. "Yes. I'd be honored to cater the opening." Over the next several weeks, Aaliyah threw herself into planning the menu. She wanted to create dishes that were sophisticated but accessible, impressive but not intimidating. Food that would appeal to both community members who might never have experienced fine dining and the wealthy donors who would be attending. She settled on a menu that celebrated comfort food elevated through technique and presentation. Herb-crusted chicken with roasted root vegetables. Perfectly prepared salmon with citrus sauce. Vegetarian options featuring local seasonal produce. Fresh baked breads. And for dessert, an assortment of pastries and a special cake designed to honor Elena's memory. Julian gave her a budget that made her eyes widen and free rein to source the best ingredients. She visited local farms, established relationships with suppliers, and meticulously tested each recipe until it was perfect. Her instructors at culinary school were thrilled when they heard about the commission. They offered to help with prep work and provided access to the school's kitchen for practice runs. Several of her classmates volunteered to assist with the actual event, excited to be part of something so meaningful. As the opening date approached, The whole neighborhood buzzed with anticipation. The youth center represented hope for many families. It was proof that someone cared about their community, that their kids would have opportunities to learn and grow in a beautiful, safe space. Julian asked Aaliyah to help him write his speech for the opening ceremony. They sat together in the cafe one evening, working through drafts, trying to capture Elena's vision in words. She believed architecture was about creating possibilities, Julian said, staring at his laptop. She said buildings should open up worlds for people, not close them off. That's beautiful, Aaliyah said. You should use that. They worked late into the evening, crafting a speech that honored Elena while looking forward to the future. A speech that acknowledged loss but celebrated hope. A speech that recognized the community's needs while committing to meeting them. The day before the opening, Aaliyah barely slept. She was at the youth center's kitchen by 5 a.m., overseeing prep work with her team of helpers. The kitchen was everything she dreamed of: professional-grade equipment, ample workspace, perfect lighting. She could easily imagine teaching classes here, mentoring young people who wanted to learn cooking. Her team worked efficiently, chopping vegetables, preparing sauces, marinating proteins. The kitchen filled with delicious aromas. Aaliyah moved between stations, tasting, adjusting seasonings, ensuring everything was perfect. By mid-afternoon, all the prep was complete. The food was ready to be finished and plated during the event. Aaliyah sent her team home to rest, knowing tomorrow would be intense. She stood alone in the kitchen for a moment, looking around at this space that Julian had built to honor Elena's memory. She thought about the scholarship that had changed her life, about the opportunities she'd received, about the chance to share her passion with others. "Thank you," she whispered to Elena, though the woman had died before they'd ever met. "Thank you for believing people deserved opportunities. Thank you for inspiring Julian to carry on that belief. I'll do everything I can to honor your vision." The opening day dawned clear and cold. Aaliyah was back at the center by 6 a.m., coordinating final preparations. By 10 a.m., when the doors opened, everything was ready. The community turned out in force. Families with children, elderly residents, young professionals, everyone curious to see the finished center. They toured the facilities with wonder, marveling at the art studio with its floor-to-ceiling windows, the library designed to feel warm and welcoming, the gymnasium equipped for various sports and activities. In the kitchen, Aaliyah and her team offered cooking demonstrations throughout the day. She taught kids how to make simple pasta dishes, showed parents quick healthy meal prep techniques, and demonstrated basic knife skills. Everyone who participated received recipe cards and small gift bags with cooking tools. The response was overwhelming. People loved the hands-on learning, the friendly atmosphere, the sense that this place was truly for them. Julian moved through the crowds, shaking hands, taking photos, explaining Elena's vision for each space. Aaliyah saw him pause at a portrait of Elena that hung in the main entrance, a beautiful photo of her smiling, full of life. He touched the frame gently, and even from across the room, Aaliyah could see the tears in his eyes. But they weren't only tears of sadness. They were tears of pride and accomplishment. He'd done it. He'd built Elena's dream. He'd created something that would serve the community for generations. At 6 p.m. the community dinner began. Over 200 people crowded into the center's main hall, which had been transformed into an elegant dining space. Long tables with white linens, simple flower arrangements, soft lighting that made everything feel special. Aaliyah's team began serving the meal. She designed the menu so each dish could be plated efficiently without sacrificing presentation. As guests received their plates, Aaliyah watched their faces light up with delight. "This is restaurant quality," one diner exclaimed. "I can't believe a kid from our neighborhood cooked this," another said proudly, not knowing Aaliyah could hear. Before dessert, Julian stood to give his speech. The room quieted immediately, everyone eager to hear from the man who'd made this center possible. "Thank you all for coming," Julian began, his voice steady but emotional. 3 years ago, my wife Elena died unexpectedly. She was an architect who believed deeply in using design to serve communities. This center was her final project, her dream of creating a space where young people could discover their potential and families could gather together. He paused, looking around the room. "When Elena died, I was lost. I stopped living. I went through the motions of existence but felt no real purpose or joy. I let this project die with her, which was the opposite of what she would have wanted." Aaliyah saw many people nodding, understanding in their faces. "But then something changed," Julian continued. "A young woman named Aaliyah Thompson, who you might recognize as the chef behind tonight's incredible meal, showed me through her kindness and wisdom that the best way to honor Elena was to keep living. To keep building. To keep creating opportunities for others. He gestured to Aaliyah, who felt her face grow warm as everyone turned to look at her. Aaliyah was working 3 jobs while raising her younger siblings after losing her mother. She had dreams of becoming a chef but no realistic path to make it happen. When I learned her story, I realized this was exactly the kind of situation Elena cared about. Talented people being held back by circumstances beyond their control. Julian's voice grew stronger. So I created the Elena Rossi Foundation to provide scholarships and support to people pursuing careers in fields that serve their communities. Aaliyah was our first scholarship recipient. Tonight's meal proves we made the right choice. The room erupted in applause. Aaliyah stood, waving shyly, overwhelmed by the recognition. This center will offer programs for young people in art, music, cooking, technology, and more, Julian continued. Everything will be free or low cost because Elena believed money shouldn't be a barrier to education. We'll have after-school programs, weekend workshops, summer camps, and family events. This space belongs to you, to this community. Use it, grow with it, make it yours. More applause, louder this time. Julian waited for it to die down before concluding. Elena Rossi believed in possibilities. She believed everyone had potential that deserved nurturing. She believed communities thrive when people support each other rather than compete. This center is my promise to keep believing those things too. To keep creating opportunities. To keep building spaces where people can grow. Thank you for helping me keep Elena's dream alive. As Julian sat down, the entire room rose in a standing ovation. Aaliyah saw tears streaming down many faces, saw the hope and gratitude in people's expressions. This mattered. This center would genuinely change lives. After the speeches, as Aaliyah's team served dessert, she found a moment to stand with Julian near Elena's portrait. You did it, she said quietly. You really did it. She'd be so proud. We did it, Julian corrected. You helped me see the path forward. The foundation, this center, all of it exists because you showed me what living with purpose looks like. They stood together, looking at Elena's smiling face in the portrait. Aaliyah felt a strange sense of connection to this woman she'd never met, this woman whose vision had changed so many lives, including her own. I wish I could have known her, Aaliyah said. She would have loved you, Julian replied. Absolutely loved you. You're exactly the kind of person she wanted to help, and you've become exactly the kind of person who helps others. That's the best legacy anyone could ask for. The evening ended with the community touring the center one more time, marveling at what had been created. Children ran through the gymnasium, adults explored the art studio, families gathered in the common areas envisioning future events. As the last guests departed, Aaliyah and her team cleaned up the kitchen. Despite being exhausted, she felt energized. The meal had been a success. People had loved the food. She'd proven she could handle a high-pressure, large-scale event. Julian found her as she was finishing up. You were magnificent tonight. That meal was extraordinary. Thank you for giving me the opportunity, Aaliyah replied. This was the most important event I've ever cooked for. Get used to it, Julian said with a smile. Once you graduate and start running our culinary program here, you'll be cooking for and teaching this community regularly. Aaliyah looked around the beautiful kitchen, imagining it filled with eager students. She thought about the journey that had brought her here, from serving coffee to Julian's grief to becoming part of something so much larger than herself. I can't wait, she said honestly. I can't wait to give other people the chances I've received. As she rode the bus home that night, Aaliyah reflected on how much had changed in 1 year. She'd gone from working 3 jobs with no prospects to being a scholarship recipient with a clear career path. Julian had gone from frozen in grief to actively building Elena's legacy. Mrs. Patterson had gone from facing the loss of her cafe to having her business secured and expanded. And all because of kindness. Because of conversations at a cafe table. Because of Julian choosing to channel his wealth toward community good. Because of people showing up for each other in times of need. When she got home, Terrence and Nia were still awake, waiting to hear about the event. It was perfect, Aaliyah told them. Everything went exactly right. And I realized something tonight. What? Nia asked. That Mom would be so proud of all of us. We've built a life she'd be happy with. We're not just surviving anymore. We're thriving. Because of Mr. Montgomery, Terrence noted. Because of a lot of people, Aaliyah corrected. Because of a community that cares. Because of opportunities being shared. Because people choose kindness over selfishness. She hugged her siblings tightly, grateful for them, grateful for everything they'd been through together and everything still to come. That night, before bed, Aaliyah received a text from Julian. "Thank you for helping me bring Elena's dream to life. Tonight proved that love doesn't end with death. It transforms into action that serves others. Sleep well, my friend. You've earned it." Aaliyah smiled and set down her phone. Tomorrow she'd return to her regular routine of classes and cafe shifts. But something fundamental had shifted. She wasn't just surviving anymore, working multiple jobs to get by. She was building a career, serving her community, living with purpose. She thought about Elena one more time before falling asleep, silently thanking her for believing opportunities should be available to everyone, for inspiring Julian to create the foundation, for designing a youth center that would change countless lives. And she made a promise to herself and to Elena's memory. She would spend the rest of her life creating opportunities for others the way opportunities had been created for her. She would be kind, generous, and devoted to serving her community. Because that's what love looked like in action. Not just loving the people close to you, but loving your whole community enough to invest in its future. That was Elena's legacy. And now it was Aaliyah's too. 6 months later, on a warm spring morning, Aaliyah walked across the stage at Riverside Culinary Institute to receive her diploma. She'd finished the 2-year program with honors, earning praise from her instructors and multiple job offers from prestigious restaurants. But she'd already accepted her true calling, running the culinary program at the Elena Rossi Community Center. In the audience, Terrence and Nia cheered loudly, holding up signs they'd made that read "Congrats LA" in rainbow letters. Mrs. Patterson dabbed her eyes with a handkerchief, beaming with pride. And Julian sat next to an empty seat, the way he used to at the cafe, with a single rose placed on the chair in Elena's honor. After the ceremony, they all gathered outside for photos. Aaliyah stood in her emerald green graduation robe, surrounded by the people who had supported her journey. "We're so proud of you," Mrs. Patterson said, hugging her tightly. "You did it, Leah," Terrence added, his voice thick with emotion. At 17 he was preparing for his own graduation next year, already accepted to several excellent universities on full scholarships from the foundation. "You're going to be the best chef ever," Nia declared with absolute confidence. At 13 she was flourishing in the Art Magnet program, her talent recognized and nurtured by excellent teachers. Julian stood slightly apart, letting the family have their moment. When Aaliyah turned to him, he stepped forward with a small wrapped box. "This is for you," he said. "From both me and Elena, in a way." Aaliyah opened it carefully. Inside was a beautiful chef's knife with her name engraved on the handle, along with a quote, "Use your gifts to serve others." "Julian," she breathed, touched beyond words. "This is too much." "It's exactly enough," he replied. Elena had a saying, "Talent without purpose is just potential. Purpose gives talent meaning." You found your purpose, Aaliyah. Now go change the world with it. The community center had been open for 3 months now, and it was exceeding everyone's expectations. The after-school programs were constantly full. Families gathered there for events. Local artists displayed their work in the gallery. And Aaliyah's cooking classes had waiting lists. She'd started teaching twice a week, offering classes for different age groups and skill levels. Kids learned basic cooking skills and food safety. Teenagers learned meal planning and budget-friendly recipes. Adults learned more advanced techniques. Everyone learned that food could be a way to care for themselves and others. The commercial kitchen saw constant use. Aaliyah had also started a program where scholarship recipients who wanted to start food businesses could use the kitchen to develop and test their products. 2 had already launched successful catering companies, another was developing a line of specialty sauces, and 1 was preparing to open a bakery. The cafe remained the heart of everything. Mrs. Patterson continued running it with the same dedication as always, but now she had help from foundation-funded employees and could actually take days off occasionally. The second floor of the building housed offices for scholarship recipient startups, and the third floor had been converted to affordable housing for 3 foundation scholarship recipients who needed stable accommodation while completing their education. On a sunny afternoon in May, 1 year after the youth center opened, Aaliyah stood in its kitchen preparing for her largest class yet. 50 students, ranging from ages 10 to 60, had signed up for a special community cooking event. They'd be preparing a meal together, then sharing it family-style in the center's dining area. As students arrived, Aaliyah organized them into teams based on skill level. Experienced cooks would handle more complex tasks, while beginners would work on simpler components. Everyone would contribute to creating the meal. Julian arrived just as class was starting, but not alone. He was accompanied by Patricia, the woman he'd been dating. They'd been together for 8 months now, and Aaliyah genuinely liked her. Patricia was warm, intelligent, and understood that Julian's love for Elena didn't diminish his capacity to build a new relationship. Mind if we watch? Julian asked. Of course not, Aaliyah replied. You're always welcome here. As she taught the class, demonstrating knife techniques and explaining flavor combinations, Aaliyah felt completely in her element. This was what she was meant to do, not cooking for wealthy restaurant patrons, but teaching community members skills they could use to care for themselves and their families. During a break, while students practiced what she demonstrated, Julian came over to chat. You're a natural teacher, he observed. I love it, Aaliyah admitted. More than I expected, honestly. Seeing someone successfully chop their first onion without crying, or watching a kid proudly plate the dish they made, it's incredibly rewarding. Elena would love this program, Julian said, looking around at the bustling kitchen. This is exactly what she envisioned. A space where people learn practical skills while building community. How are things with the foundation? Aaliyah asked. She was less involved in the day-to-day operations now that she'd graduated and taken her full-time position at the center, but she still sat on the board and helped with scholarship selection. Growing faster than we projected, Julian replied. We're awarding 60 scholarships this year, and we've started expanding to other communities. Rebecca is hiring more staff to handle the growth. That's wonderful. We couldn't have done it without your input, Julian said. Your perspective shaped everything we do. The holistic support model, the mentorship program, the emphasis on careers that serve communities, all of that came from your experiences and insights. Aaliyah felt warmth spread through her chest. I'm just glad I could help. You've done more than help, Julian said seriously. You've been part of building something that will outlast all of us. Generations from now, people will still be benefiting from these programs. That's legacy. After the class ended and everyone shared the meal they'd prepared together, Aaliyah sat at a table with her students, enjoying the fruits of their labor. The food wasn't restaurant perfect, but it was delicious and made with care. More importantly, it represented connection and learning and community. An elderly woman named Mrs. Rodriguez sat next to her. Thank you for teaching this class, she said in heavily accented English. I raised 6 children but never learned to cook well. Always just basic food. Tonight I made something beautiful. You did, Aaliyah confirmed, gesturing at the perfectly seasoned chicken on Mrs. Rodriguez's plate. And now you can make it for your family. My daughter, she works 2 jobs like you used to, Mrs. Rodriguez continued. No time to cook. I can help her now make good meals for my grandchildren. You gave me a gift. Aaliyah felt tears prick her eyes. You gave me a gift too. The chance to teach you. That's what makes this work meaningful. As the evening wound down and students departed with full stomachs and new skills, Aaliyah cleaned up the kitchen. She moved through the familiar motions, feeling deeply satisfied with her life's direction. Julian found her as she was finishing. Want to walk over to the cafe? I'm craving one of Mrs. Patterson's famous chocolate chip cookies. Always, Aaliyah agreed. They walked through the neighborhood together, past the youth center that was now a beloved landmark, past community gardens that had sprung up in the center's wake, past newly opened small businesses run by Foundation Scholarship recipients. The cafe was busy with the evening crowd. Mrs. Patterson waved from behind the counter, already preparing Julian's order before he asked. They sat at Julian's old table by the window. The carved initials were still there. JM+ER. Julian traced them with his finger the way he used to, but now the gesture seemed more affectionate than painful. Can I tell you something? Julian asked. Of course. I'm happy, Julian said simply. For the first time since Elena died, I'm genuinely happy. Not just going through the motions or finding moments of contentment, but actually happy with my life. I'm so glad, Aaliyah said warmly. Patricia and I are talking about getting married, Julian continued. Nothing certain yet, but we're discussing it. At first I felt guilty, like I was betraying Elena. But then I realized that Elena would be furious if I spent the rest of my life alone because of her. She'd want me to be happy, to build a new life while never forgetting our time together. She absolutely would, Aaliyah agreed. Love doesn't have a limited capacity. Loving Patricia doesn't diminish what you had with Elena. Exactly. And I wanted to thank you for helping me understand that. When I first met you, I was trapped in my grief. You helped me see that healing didn't mean forgetting, but rather finding ways to honor Elena's memory through action. You did that all yourself, Aaliyah protested. I just listened. You did more than listen. You showed me what resilience looks like. You demonstrated how to carry loss while still building a meaningful life. You were my example, Aaliyah. You showed me it was possible. They sat quietly for a moment, sipping their coffee. Outside the window, the neighborhood bustled with evening activity. Inside the cafe, the familiar hum of conversation created a comforting backdrop. I have something to tell you too, Aaliyah said. The foundation is publishing a cookbook of recipes developed by scholarship recipients in culinary programs. I'm editing it, and all proceeds will fund additional scholarships. That's a wonderful idea, Julian said enthusiastically. And, Aaliyah continued, I'm developing a proposal for a food truck program. We'd help scholarship recipients start their own mobile food businesses, providing the trucks and initial support. It would create sustainable careers while bringing good food to underserved neighborhoods. Julian's eyes lit up. I love it. Write up a formal proposal and we'll present it to the foundation board next month. They continued talking, planning future programs, dreaming about expanding their impact. The conversation flowed easily, two friends who'd been through a journey together and emerged stronger on the other side. Mrs. Patterson came by with a plate of cookies. On the house, she said. For my two favorite people. You spoil us, Aaliyah said, taking a cookie. You've earned it, Mrs. Patterson replied. Both of you. Look what you've built together. Look how you've changed this community. After Mrs. Patterson walked away, Julian raised his coffee cup in a toast. To Elena, whose vision started all of this. Aaliyah raised hers as well. To Elena. And to new beginnings built on love and loss. They clinked their cups gently. As the evening progressed, other cafe regulars stopped by their table to chat. Mr. Henderson shared news about his grandson who'd just been accepted to the Foundation's Architecture Scholarship Program. Mrs. Garcia talked about the book club that now met at the youth center. Mr. Giuseppe's son Michael mentioned hiring 2 Foundation culinary graduates to work at the bakery. Everywhere Aaliyah looked, she saw ripples of positive change. The Foundation's work was woven into the fabric of the community now, creating opportunities and connections that would continue expanding for years to come. Later that night, as Aaliyah walked home, she thought about how far she'd come. 1 year ago, she'd been exhausted and hopeless, working 3 jobs with no prospect of change. Now she had a career she loved, financial security, the satisfaction of serving her community, and the deep fulfillment that came from helping others achieve their dreams. She thought about her mother, who'd worked herself to exhaustion to provide for her children, who'd believed in education and opportunity and treating people with kindness, who'd taught Aaliyah that the measure of a life wasn't what you accumulated but what you gave. I made it, Mom, Aaliyah whispered to the night sky. I made it, and I'm going to spend the rest of my life helping others make it too. When she got home, Terrence was studying at the kitchen table, preparing for final exams. Nia was in her room, working on a portfolio for an advanced summer art program she'd been accepted into. Aaliyah made tea and joined Terrence at the table. How's studying going? Good. Math test tomorrow, but I feel prepared. You'll do great. You always do. Terrence looked up from his textbook. Yeah, I've been thinking. After I graduate college, I want to work for the foundation too. Maybe in the financial side, helping manage scholarships and grants. I want to be part of what you and Mr. Montgomery built. Aaliyah felt her heart swell with pride. That would be wonderful. We'd be lucky to have you. And I want to teach art classes at the center, Nia added, having wandered into the kitchen. When I'm older, I want to help kids the way the foundation helped us. Aaliyah hugged both her siblings, overwhelmed with love and gratitude. They were all going to be okay. Better than okay. They were going to thrive and help others thrive. They were going to be part of something larger than themselves. That night, lying in bed, Aaliyah thought about Julian's journey from grief to purpose. She thought about Elena's vision living on through the center and the foundation. She thought about how one conversation in a cafe could start a chain reaction of positive change. Most of all, she thought about love. Not just romantic love, though that was part of it with Julian finding happiness with Patricia. But also love for community, love for possibility, love for human potential. The kind of love that motivated people to use their resources, whether time or money or talent, to make the world better. Her phone buzzed with a final text from Julian. Thank you for being my friend. Thank you for helping me find my way back to living. Tomorrow I'm going to the jeweler to look at rings. Elena's blessing would mean everything. So would yours. Aaliyah smiled and typed back, you have both. Patricia is lucky to have you and you're lucky to have her. Elena would be so happy that you're choosing life and love again. Congratulations, my friend. As she drifted off to sleep, Aaliyah felt profound peace. Her life had meaning. Her work mattered. Her family was thriving. And she'd played a part in healing a broken heart, which had led to opportunities for hundreds of people. She dreamed that night of the future. Of the youth center bustling with activity. Of students learning cooking skills in the commercial kitchen. Of Terrence managing foundation finances. Of Nia teaching art to eager children. Of Julian and Patricia's wedding, celebrating new beginnings built on the foundation of old love. And somewhere in the dream, Elena Rossi smiled, proud of what her vision had become. Proud that her death hadn't ended with grief but had transformed into purposeful action that served the community she'd loved. Proud that Julian had kept his promise to keep living, to keep building, to keep creating opportunities for others. The story that began with a grieving billionaire ordering 2 coffees every day had become something much larger. It had become proof that loss could lead to legacy. That pain could transform into purpose. That kindness and generosity could change everything. And it had become the story of a young woman named Aaliyah Thompson, who'd worked 3 jobs while dreaming of a better future, and who now spent her days making better futures possible for others. That was the real ending. Not in tying up every loose thread, but in recognizing that the work would continue. That the foundation would keep growing. That the youth center would serve new generations. That Julian would build a happy life with Patricia while never forgetting Elena. That Aaliyah would spend decades teaching and mentoring and creating opportunities. The story ended, but the impact went on. Because that's what love does. It doesn't end. It transforms. It multiplies. It creates ripples that spread wider and wider until they touch lives far beyond what any one person could imagine. Julian Montgomery had come into Riverside Cafe every day for 3 years, ordering 2 coffees, one for himself and one for the wife who would never drink it again. Now he came occasionally, sometimes with Patricia, sometimes alone, always with gratitude for the journey that had brought him from paralyzed grief to purposeful living. He no longer needed to order 2 coffees. But he'd never forget why he had, or the young waitress who'd helped him understand that the best way to honor the dead was to live fully in service of others. That was the story. That was the legacy. And it was just the beginning.